Chapter 934. As usual, a fleet of 30 ships was passing through the Korean Strait between North Korea and the Japanese Empire. The 5-star flag, hanging high in the sky, showed their identity. Chu Gang, the second commander of the 3rd Division, was looking ahead with his binoculars from time to time. Chu Gang was originally just a battalion commander. He worked his way up from the bottom of the ranks. A while ago, when he was dealing with the Kim Bien dynasty, he made a great contribution and was promoted to the commander of the 2nd Division. This was also his first time escorting and transporting supplies as a commander. Now that he had become a regiment commander, his status was different from before. The phrase, "stand higher and see further," was exactly what he was feeling at this moment. Looking ahead, North Korean ships would appear in the Korean Strait from time to time, which made him very unhappy. These annoying flies. I didn't like them when I passed by here before. I will find a chance to teach them a lesson. He had been on this transport route several times before, but not as a commander. Even when he saw North Korean ships staring at them, he just didn't like it. But now he was a commander. According to the rules of the Cold Front, he could now submit a report to the 6th young master. He decided to finish the mission and go back to explain the dangers of North Korea. Although he didn't think that the other party would dare to do anything to him, the feeling of being watched was very uncomfortable. The fleet continued to pass through the strait. The number of North Korean ships was increasing, reaching more than 200 ships. Chu Gang, who was standing in the command room, felt a little strange. What's going on? How come there are so many North Korean ships this time? They won't dare to attack us. A staff officer next to him answered aloud. Anyone could hear the arrogance in his voice. What was the Cold Front? It represented the strongest combat power. So far, except for the 1st Cavalry Division, which was personally appointed by the 6th young master, they didn't think highly of any other army. For the staff officer's words, everyone nodded in agreement, including Chu Gang. They didn't think that anyone would dare to attack them. Or rather, someone dared to do it, but it definitely shouldn't be the North Korean Navy that they had always looked down on. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, more and more North Korean ships appeared, and they came within 100 meters of the ship under the flag that they wanted the mercenaries to stop the ship for inspection. No matter what, this was the other party's territory. Although they had never been inspected before, they actually had the right to make such a request. In the face of this reasonable request, for a time, many ships couldn't help but slow down. Some even stopped. Oh no, they might really attack. Immediately send out the signal flag to inform the other ships to pass through quickly. At the same time, prepare the cannons to fire. Chu Gang quickly reacted after a scream in his heart, especially when he saw the North Korean ships accelerating towards his fleet through the binoculars. The bad feeling grew stronger and stronger. After the order was given, the flag bearers quickly rushed to the bow of the ship to convey the commander's orders. At this moment, the North Korean ships that were approaching also began to move. They first accelerated and rushed to the side of the 5-star Army's fleet. Then, in a planned manner, 7 or 8 ships surrounded one of the 5-star Army ships. The deck of the ship was filled with North Korean soldiers holding bows and arrows. When the distance was less than 100 meters, the bows and arrows rained down like rain. The long-prepared attack began. They didn't prepare, or rather, they didn't think that a small North Korean would dare to attack them. The moment they met the enemy, the 5-star Army suffered a loss. A few of the 5-star Army officers that were prepared to shout were shot by arrows, either dead or injured. This was a battle that they weren't prepared for, and it was also an unequal battle. Since they weren't prepared, and the number of ships was 8-1, the 2nd Regiment of the 3rd Sea Division fell into a difficult situation as soon as they met the enemy. Dozens of officers and soldiers were caught off guard and shot by the arrows. They either fell to the ground or fell into the hands of the soldiers. The 5-star Army, which only had 2 battalions guarding the ships, fell into a disadvantageous position. Considering the fact that they had to escort more supplies, the 2nd Regiment didn't send out all of its members. The 1st Regiment only sent out 2 battalions of the 5 battalions. Even with the addition of the commander and some officers, there were only about 800 people. Divided into 30 ships, there were less than 30 soldiers on each ship. The North Korean Navy sent out more than 200 ships and more than 10,000 soldiers. This kind of disparity, in addition to the fact that one side came prepared and the other was unprepared, the battle instantly became one-sided. After the North Korean ships gained the upper hand, they quickly began to close in. When the distance between them was less than 20 meters, a large wooden plank that had been prepared beforehand was thrown out, forming a temporary passage between the 2 ships. Fire the cannons. Commander Zhou Gang on the main ship saw that the situation was getting worse and worse. He first took a gun from the staff officer beside him and shouted. At this moment his eyes were red. The fleet was under attack, and as the commander here, if he couldn't solve the problem, then whether he returned or not, only death would await him. Whether it was for his duty or for the dignity of Lung Fong, he couldn't afford to hesitate at this moment. Commander, our ships are too close to the enemy ships. If we fire now, we might hurt our own people. When the cannoneer heard the order, his face was first shocked. Then he said with difficulty, "Don't worry so much. The ships that stopped have no chance of leaving. Even if the soldiers die, we can't let them and their supplies fall into the hands of the North Koreans. Quickly fire the cannons." The situation was so tense that Zhou Gang didn't have time to think about so many problems. What he needed to do now was to fire the cannons at the North Korean Navy and then take advantage of the chaos to buy time for the other ships to retreat. Following the commander's order, the cannons sounded and landed on a North Korean ship, causing a huge explosion and flames to rise into the sky. At the same time, the soldiers of Lung Fong on the various ships began to fire back. Bullets flew out and landed in the North Korean Navy's camp, causing the soldiers to fall one after another. A chaotic battle had begun. Cannon fire came one after another. At this moment, Zhou Gang didn't want to save ammunition anymore. In order to turn the situation around, what he needed to do now was to use up all his ammunition in the shortest time possible to deal a heavy blow to the North Korean Navy and provide cover for the other ships to leave. It was obvious that it was impossible to continue forward. Commander Zhou Gang gave another order, so the ships turned around and sailed back to the sea. At this moment, it was impossible to complete the transportation mission. The only thing they could do was to minimize the losses. The bullets and arrows collided. If this was on land with the advantages of guns, they could definitely fight back and retreat at the same time, causing heavy damage to the enemy. However, this was the sea. The space on the ship was limited and there weren't many places to dodge. Many soldiers were forced to retreat to a corner and were shot to death by the arrows. The battle had only lasted for half an hour, but the soldiers on 3 ships had already been killed and the ships had been taken over by the North Korean Navy. Concentrate the last of the cannons and sink those 3 ships. With a face full of joy, Zhou Gang gave the order to fire his own ships. Since the ships had already been taken over by the enemy, they couldn't snatch them back. Now they could only sink them and not let the enemy gain any benefits. At the same time, order the other ships to retreat quickly. Don't fight. Tell the soldiers that we will definitely take revenge today, but for now, we should immediately leave the battlefield. Zhou Gang's eyes were red as he gritted his teeth and ordered the fleet to retreat. Orders were issued one after another, and cannonballs flew down, hitting the 3 ships that were about to become their spoils of war. One of the cannonballs unfortunately landed on another ship that was retreating, and a raging fire seemed to illuminate this part of the sea. From the start of the battle to the end, it was less than 4 hours. The 5-star army had lost 4 warships, and more than 500 soldiers were dead or injured. This kind of loss was more than 50% of the naval battle. It was the greatest loss since the establishment of the Cold Front Navy. Zhou Gang, who had retreated far away, stood at the back of the ship. Looking at the huge fire in the distance, his eyes were red as he swore that he would definitely take revenge for today. He would definitely make the North Koreans pay a heavy price for what they had done today. Ming stood on the largest North Korean ship and looked at the 5-star army ships that were slowly retreating. He didn't say anything for a long time. "Sir, should we send someone to chase after them?" A Marine general came forward and asked. "No need. Our mission is to prevent them from passing through here. Now that we have achieved our goal, we can retreat." Ming shook his head and rejected the suggestion to continue chasing. Then, a trace of worry appeared on his face, a power that even the great Ming dynasty had to be wary of, and now they had taken the initiative to provoke them. What kind of consequences and effects would there be? Ming didn't dare to think about it, but his gut feeling told him that they seemed to have done something wrong this time. They seemed to have to pay a price for it. However, no matter how much Ming thought about it, he would never have thought that this would be the beginning of their North Korean destruction. From now on, there would be no North Korea in the world. Zhou Gang took advantage of the advanced nature of the ships and quickly left the battlefield. After leaving the Korean Straits with 26 ships, he reported the details of what had happened to the Navy headquarters in the form of a telegram. At the same time, he requested to be dealt with. The Navy headquarters telegram room was also in chaos after receiving this telegram. Vice Commander Gao Xiong, who was in charge, didn't believe the contents of the telegram. He didn't believe that someone would take the initiative to make an enemy of the 5-star army. Chapter 935. Call back immediately and confirm if it's true. Hurry! Although Gao Xiong knew that the officers under him would not have the guts to make a false report, he still needed to confirm it. Soon, the verified telegram was sent back. Zhou Gang used his head as a guarantee. Gao Xiong knew that things would not go wrong. He quickly said to the adjutant beside him, "Let's go to the palace." At this moment, the palace of Chichen City was extremely tense. It was only because the second madam was about to give birth. According to the authoritative doctor, Zhao Yanmei, the child should be born in a few days. Because of this, the atmosphere in the palace was extremely tense. When someone walked past the second madam's palace, their footsteps would be much lighter, as if they were afraid that they would make a noise and disturb the madam. That would be too great a crime. Yang Qindong, who had always been calm in the face of trouble, also showed the nervousness of being a father at this moment. In both his previous life and this life, he had experienced a lot of bullets and seen countless moments of life and death. However, this was the first time he had his own child. People were always full of respect for the unknown. At this moment, he was no exception. Nervousness and apprehension had been wrapping around him. Beta Persei changed his usual carefree attitude and carefully came to Yang Qindong's side and whispered, "Young master, Deputy Commander Gao is here. He said that he has something important to say to you." Yang Qindong, who was already a little nervous, frowned after hearing Beta Persei's words. No one did not know what time it was, but Gao Xiong still came. This was enough to show the importance of reporting. "Okay, tell him to wait in the side hall." In the side hall, Gao Xiong received the telegram from Zhou Gang and handed it to Yang Qindong. Then he lowered his head and said, "Sixth young master, I have sent a second telegram to confirm the authenticity of this matter." What a bold North Korean Navy. We did not go to find trouble with them, but they dared to find trouble with us. They really don't know what's good for them. Yang Qindong read the report. After seeing that 4 ships had sunk and nearly 500 soldiers had died, he suddenly slammed the table. His eyes were filled with a terrifying light. "Yes, I am also responsible for this matter. Our Marine headquarters has never paid attention to this problem. We always thought that no one would dare to do anything to us, so we were careless and gave the enemy an opportunity. I am sorry." Seeing that Yang Qindong was angry, Gao Xiong quickly bowed his head and admitted his mistake. The Marine headquarters is indeed responsible. Some people have been blinded by victory. This incident is a wake-up call for us. Underestimating the opponent at any time is a fatal behavior. You have to use this incident to reflect on yourselves. Yes, sixth young master. I will reflect on my actions. Knowing that Yang Qindong was greatly dissatisfied with this matter, Gao Xiong needed to express his stance. You don't need to reflect on yourself. This time, everyone is responsible. After you go back, immediately hold a meeting and carry out self-reflection activities. Then prepare for battle. Yang Qindong thought back to the last time he returned to Chosen City from Haijin. He saw the North Korean Navy in action. At that time, he felt that this was a problem, but he didn't expect the problem to erupt so quickly. Gao Xiong left quickly after receiving the order. Yang Qindong sat in the side hall and did not leave immediately. He still had to think about a problem. He had no contact with North Korea, and there was no hatred. Why did the other party choose to attack him? This did not make sense. Beta Persei send a telegram to Yang San and ask him to send someone to find out which force North Korea has been in contact with recently. Also, let Yang San inform the North Korean Security Department and ask them to arrange the troops there. Conduct a detailed investigation of the strength of the army and report it to me. Yes, young master. Beta Persei agreed and turned to do it. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, threw this matter to the back of his mind and strode towards the backyard of the palace. The Cold Front Navy was raided by the North Korean Navy, and it was said that they suffered heavy losses. The news quickly spread, and then the 6th Division commanders of the Navy put down the things at hand and went straight to the Navy headquarters. In the headquarters, the division commanders arrived one by one, and then there were voices shouting to go to war and avenge the Navy. Gao Xiong explained to everyone that the 6th young master already knew about this matter, and all they had to do was wait for orders. At the same time, he called everyone together for a meeting to discuss which division or army should take action to wash away the shame of the Navy. Just as the Navy headquarters was boiling, a sharp cry came from the palace of Haijin. Yang Qindong's eldest daughter was born. It had a chubby face, 2 rows of curved eyebrows, a pair of big, bright eyes, a small nose, a pair of bodhisattva ears, a small, chubby mouth, and a round double chin under the mouth. Her hands were chubby, and her fingers were short and thick. She was very cute, carefully hugging the eldest daughter in his arms. Yang Qindong couldn't close his mouth from smiling. Taking this opportunity, the eldest madam, Hu Yen, came forward to ask for the name of the child. Yang Qindong had long been prepared. Previously, Zhao Yanmei had also said that it was very likely that this child would be a girl, so he said, "Her name will be Yang Jie, which means pure and kind. Her nickname will be Lele, and she will be happy for the rest of her life." Lele's voice made the palace really lively for a while. Yang Qindong also received the congratulations of the officials. On the 7th day of Lele's birth, he came from the palace to the Navy headquarters. At this time, the Navy headquarters was full of officers, and there were 2 generals with gold stars on their shoulders. They were the 1st Sea Army Commander Gao Xiong and the 2nd Sea Army Commander Yu Guang. "You're all here, then sit down for the meeting." After Yang Qindong's eyes scanned the crowd, he sat down at the head of the table. The other officers, led by Gao Xiong, also sat down in their chairs. Each of them was in a dignified position, standing in a military posture. "Is Zhou Gang here? Tell me about the situation." After sitting down, Yang Qindong took the lead and said. As he spoke, Zhou Gang, who was in the last row of the meeting room, stood up. He was just a captain, and according to the rules, he was not qualified to participate in such a high-level meeting. It was only because he was a participant in this battle that he made an exception. "Sixth young master, the situation is like this." Although he had reported the ins and outs of the situation more than once since returning to Crimson City, this was the first time he reported in front of the 6th young master. After a quarter of an hour, Zhou Gang finished his report. In the end, he asked for instructions as a participant. "Sixth young master, the this battle was completely unprepared. Many of our comrades died miserably, facing the enemy who was already prepared. Some of them did not even have the chance to shoot. But even so, none of them retreated. They fought with their fists, feet, and even teeth. They were very brave. Okay, I understand. You can sit down. Yang Qindong looked at Zhou Gang with appreciation and nodded. Because of Zhou Gang's seat, the conference room quickly fell into silence again. But everyone's eyes fell on Yang Qindong at this moment. Obviously, they were all waiting for an order, an opportunity to take revenge on North Korea, not letting everyone wait for long. Under Yang Qindong's signal, Beta Persei first wrote some documents and sent them one by one to the 2 commanders and 6 division commanders. Everyone take a look. This is the information from the Security Department. More than a month ago, North Korean envoy Zhang Linji entered Baiming's Kyoto to pay tribute. And it was also more than a month ago that Northern Ming had proposed to buy horses from the Prairie City. However, because they wanted to trade on credit, they were rejected by us. The 2 things that seemed to be unrelated were now mentioned by Yang Qindong together, and the faces of several officers became dark. So North Korea's attack at sea should have a lot to do with Baiming? Just as everyone's thoughts were changing, Yang Qindong once again gestured to Beta Persei, and another document and map were sent to the hands of the officers above the division level. These are 2 maps of North Korea obtained by the Intelligence Department. They clearly mark the deployment of the North Korean military forces. After comparison, the 2 pieces of information are consistent. It should be true and credible. If you have any opinions, you can speak up. What else is there to say? Of course, we'll fight. This time, no matter who ordered the North Korean Navy to fire at our 5-star army, it's a provocation. They should be prepared for our retaliation. Deputy Commander Gao Xiong was the first to speak. It seemed that Gao Xiong was a little agitated and even a little straightforward, but in fact he had already expressed his attitude. The enemy this time was only the North Korean army, and it had nothing to do with Baiming. This was also the reason why Yang Qindong wanted to explain the North Korean diplomatic mission to Baiming to everyone first. If he didn't make some things clear now, the officers below would inevitably figure it out. If this matter was related to Baiming, then after the war with North Korea, would they fight Baiming? Even if the great Ming dynasty had been divided into the south, Baiming's territory was still not small. A lot of preparation was needed to take down Baiming. With Yang Xie's current strength, he didn't have the appetite to take down Baiming. It wasn't that the 5-star army wasn't strong enough, but that Yang Xie wasn't strong enough. If they fought now, there was a high chance of winning the final victory. But what about after they successfully occupied it? How would they manage such a large territory? How would they arrange for the Han people? Yang Qindong's goal was to let the Han people live a good life. He wanted them to walk at the top of the world and become the most respected race in the world. If they only took down Baiming but couldn't manage it, and instead let the people live a bitter life, then it would go against his original intention. This wasn't what Yang Qindong wanted to see and hoped for. Chapter 936. Therefore, it's not that Baiming can't fight, but they must be prepared. It's best if they can receive it safely. Even if they can't, they must think about all kinds of things to deal with after the war. With the current strength of Yang Xie, he can't do this, so it's better not to move and continue to accumulate strength. This is one of the themes of Yang Qindong's meeting today. Fighting North Korea is fine, whether it's to show the dignity of the 5-star army or to avenge the dead brothers. This war must be fought, but it must not involve other people, especially Baiming. No one is allowed to cause trouble, otherwise it will be asking for trouble. Gao Xiong saw this and immediately expressed it with practical actions. Those who can become officers of the army and division are all smart people. They all stood up and expressed their opinions one by one. There is only one purpose, and that is, this time only the North Korean army is targeting them, and they only want to fight the North Korean army. The strategic goal is set. Then it's time to choose the army to fight. Under the leadership of Yang Qindong, the 2nd Marine Army got a chance to fight. This is also the opportunity that the 6th young master gave the 2nd Marine Army more opportunities to practice. Although the individual quality of the 2nd Marine Army soldiers is still very good, after all, they still lack combat experience. This time, it's a good opportunity to deal with North Korea. Next, they just need to wait for them to come up with a battle plan. After leaving the Navy headquarters, Yang Qindong went to the Cheeging City, Lord's Mansion again to plan who to send to North Korea. In history, North Korea is like a willow tree, always used to fall with the wind. Yang Qindong naturally has no good impression of such a country, and this time they dared to provoke him, so there's no need for them to exist. Arranging 200,000 Han people to enter North Korea is the task Yang Qindong gave to Yu Qian. Because of this matter, Yu Qian was both happy and in pain. In his eyes, this 6th young master was a bit too belligerent, and the direct result was that the Han commoners were increasingly lacking. As long as there were knowledgeable commoners who had a sense of nationality, they would always be sent to other places. Even now, some of the large factories in Crimson City were lacking in manpower. Because of this matter, the directors of those large factories had often come to find him to vent their anger, making quite a bit of trouble. She knew that Yu Qian was a hard-working person, so as long as you looked for him because of work, needless to say, he would never get angry. However, this made Yu Qian suffer. Yang Qindong was the one who gave the order to transfer people away. His subordinates did not dare to ask the 6th young master for an explanation, so they all came to him. How could he not be in pain? But on the contrary, every time Yang Xie sent out a few Han Chinese, it meant that Yang Xie's territory had expanded and the Han Chinese's influence had increased. Yang Xie's life in the future would be better. As a Han person with a strong sense of national pride, Yu Qian felt very happy about this. He was very optimistic about Yang Qindong's way of doing things. In his view, the Han people had the best history of civilization, the highest intelligence, and even the kindest heart. They were educated, courteous, and open-minded. They should be the rulers and should not drag out an ignoble existence under the oppression of the foreign races. Yang Qindong was working hard to do this step. Since he had caught up with this good era, of course he should do his best to cooperate with him. Therefore, whenever there was a need for cadres, half of the city Lord's Mansion would be taken away. When another batch of cadres was finally formed, it would not take long for them to be taken away again. Even his own son was sent out. However, he was not angry at all. He was still in pain and happy at the same time. This time, Yang Qindong came to ask for people again. Yu Qian gritted his teeth and decided to take away another 200,000 people. But considering that if this continued, the Han population would become smaller and smaller, and in the end, they would not be able to make ends meet. Thus, he couldn't help but remind Duke Zhongdan of the Han people that were brought back with money, other than the elderly and children. There are less than 2 million adult men and women left after several transfers. Moreover, most of them are illiterate. It is too difficult to train these people without any foundation. I'm afraid that it won't be so easy next time. Rest assured, City Lord. The south of the great Ming dynasty is currently at war, and I have already arranged for people to take in the Han commoners. At that time, there will be many homeless commoners who can no longer live and will be transported to Crimson City. There will be a large number of them, and it will be enough to make up for the shortage. However, it will take a lot of effort to train them. After all, in the future, they will represent the Han people and go to various places to be masters. In terms of quality, they must be improved. I do not wish for their gluttony and laziness to lead to the dissatisfaction of the other races. If that is the case, no matter how many troops we have, it will not be enough. Yang Qindong replied with a smile. While he was exporting, he did not forget to import. He repeated this process over and over again. The commoners who entered Crimson City were ignorant and poor, while the commoners who left were knowledgeable and knowledgeable. Under their influence, the areas under their rule would definitely develop better and better, and the overall situation would also become better and better. Good. With the words of the Duke Zhongdan, this old man is relieved. Yu Qian smiled with satisfaction. He was very much in favor of Yang Qindong using the people to influence the people, using culture to influence the culture of the foreign race, and using habits to influence the culture of the foreign race. As long as this matter was done well, perhaps after 100 years or even not so long, it would only take 2 or 3 generations. Everyone would be used to the Han people being the most powerful and noble race in the world. They would be used to learning Chinese and speaking the Han language. In the long run, it was possible for the world to become one. Yu Qian promised to give another 200,000 people who were already educated and had a certain level of skills. This was equivalent to having the cornerstone to enter North Korea. Next, Yang Qindong successively gave orders to Shiqing, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Luzon, and other places. He asked them to prepare 30,000 to 100,000 people and prepare to move out. At the same time, they were also prepared to accept the same number of people who moved back. Yang Qindong wanted to use this method to make a big change. First, the density of the local population would be diluted, and the outsiders would gradually occupy the place. When the time was right, the local residents would have to leave the place where they grew up. In this way, these people would become rootless trees, and there would be no need to worry about what they would do. This was a long-term work, and it was also a big project. Only someone like Yang Qindong, who had a huge territory and enough financial resources, could do this. Yang Qindong, who had been busy for a day, returned to the palace. The first thing he did was to go to the second husband's bedroom to see his eldest daughter, Lele. Lele had been born for more than 10 days. Her eyes could already see the outside world clearly. Her big eyes were very cute. Whenever Yang Qindong held her in his arms, she would stick close to him tightly and then carefully look at the man who was holding her. She was curious and very quiet. In the words of the first Madame Huyen, this was the feeling of blood. Little Lele knew that this was her father, the person closest to her in the world. So every time she was in her father's arms, she was very obedient and didn't make a fuss. These words made Yang Qindong, who was used to not showing his emotions on his face, so he was elated. Every time this happened, he would proudly say that he was a qualified father, a great father, and a father who cared deeply for his daughter. Yang Qindong liked little Lele so much that Xiao Yin, who was still in confinement, was very satisfied. Originally, she thought that giving birth to a daughter would cause the young master to be unhappy. Now, it seemed that she had worried too much. In fact, it wasn't just Xiao Yin. The other madams also had the same idea. But with little Lele's pearl in front of them, everyone was a lot more relieved. Presumably, no matter if it was a boy or a girl, the husband would be very happy and happy. But happy days always seem to be short. 3 days later, a set of very specific battle plans were sent to Yang Qindong by the 2nd Marine Army. Looking at the battle plans that were originally drawn up according to the Korean military's deployment, Yang Qindong waved his pen and approved. This also indicated that he didn't have much time left in Choken City. Next, he needed to return to the battlefield and let those who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth know what the consequences of angering him for having ideas about the 5-star army were. At the end of the 8th month of the year 1454, more than 600 ships of various sizes, including 6 large warships, New Number 4, New Number 5, New Number 6, War God Number 4, Number 5, and Number 6, more than 100 medium-sized warships, several hundred small warships, and more than 100 transport ships. Under Yang Qindong's personal leadership, the 2nd Marine Army was mobilized. The 4th Marine Division, 5th Marine Division, and 6th Marine Division, totaling more than 20,000 people, left Choken City's naval port and headed straight for the Korean kingdom, thousands of miles away. After years of continuous efforts by Choken City's shipyard, the warships had been converted from wind and human power to combustion power. The technology couldn't be said to be very mature, especially in terms of flexibility. There was still a lot of room for improvement. But in terms of speed, it was already very fast, especially those small warships. Once they entered the sea, they were like fish. Whether it was forward or backward, whether there was wind or no waves, whether it was sunny or rainy, their speed was extremely fast. This time, these hundreds of small warships acted as scouts. They guarded the two sides of the large fleet and headed straight for the Korean kingdom. Along the way, whenever they encountered a ship that wasn't on their side, they would stop it if they could. If they couldn't, they would use cannons to sink it. In short, they were not allowed to spread the news. Since a long time ago, the Five-Star Army had taken control of the Ming dynasty's East China Sea. Usually, the number of ships that could be seen here was very limited. This made it easy for them to clean up. Along the way, they sealed off all information. A few days later, they arrived at the Korean Strait and bumped into the first batch of Korean naval forces. Chapter 937. This time, the 2nd Marine Corps came prepared. They were light and did not bring too many supplies, allowing them to reach the fastest speed possible. As soon as they saw their target, they surrounded the enemy ship. Hundreds of small warships surrounded the enemy ship like ants. Lock onto the target. All ships will fire until they sink or surrender. The commander of the 2nd Marine Corps, Yu Guang, asked Yang Qindong in the command room before giving the first order. Yang Qindong, who was also in the command room, did not speak from beginning to end. He just watched everything that happened in front of him as an observer. Since Yu Guang was able to get Gao Xiong's recommendation to be the commander of the 2nd Marine Corps, he should be very capable. In front of people who had been in naval warfare for many years, Yang Qindong would not casually give orders and interrupt the other party's command plan. On the warships of the 2nd Marine Corps, there were fixed cannons. Except for the 6 main ships, the cannons on the other ships were not made in the large warehouse. They were directly made by the shipyard in Resin City. Their weakness was that their attack range was short, the power of the cannons was small, and the accuracy was poor. However, because they were cheap and the cannons were simple to make, there were enough of them. When the 500 warships, not including the transport ships, formed a circle and surrounded the North Korean Navy, and after the siege began, cannon fire filled the sky. One cannonball after another was fired from the warships. One after another, huge waves flashed in the area. If one was unlucky, a North Korean ship would be hit by a cannonball. In light cases, the ship would be tilted and unable to fight. In heavy cases, the ship would directly sink and the people on board would be fed to the fish. This kind of unequal battle only took a little more than an hour and it was already over. Of the 50 North Korean ships, 12 were sunk, 18 were heavily damaged, and the remaining 20 or so were forced to hang the white flag and surrender. From the beginning to the end, not a single enemy ship escaped. After completing the first battle with a high standard posture, the commander of the Second Army, Yu Guang, asked for instructions from Yang Qindong to continue moving forward. While the other side was still unaware of the news of their arrival, they directly drove into the other side's military port and carried out a surprise attack. Agreed. Yang Qindong looked at the map and saw that the North Korean Navy's port was only 200 nautical miles away from them. He nodded and approved of the battle plan. General Yue Guang immediately gave the order to leave a portion of the ships to clean up the mess, while the other ships headed towards the North Korean Navy port. The main force of the 3 divisions arrived in the evening. At this moment, the North Korean Navy was completely defenseless. The soldiers were eating dinner when the artillery shells fell from the sky. They didn't even need to use the 6 main cabins to open fire. Just the firepower of the other small and medium-sized warships was enough to turn this place into a sea of fire. Then they took advantage of the night to enter and seize the Navy port in the dark, establishing the victory of the second battle. Even in the middle of the night, the landing of the transport ships did not stop. In the past, who knew how many times they had chosen to train at night. Now it finally came in handy. C Division 4, C Division 5, and C Division SAXS Cold Vanguard warriors landed on land. Armed with 95 style Hwida and 7-star repeating crossbows, they charged straight for the heart of North Korea. On the 6th day of the 9th month, the 4th Division of the 2nd Sea Army, under the command of Ding Yen and the 1st World Cavalry Division, took the lead in attacking Pusan. In just 2 hours, they broke through the Korean army and reached Seoul in just half a month. The 5th Division of the 5th Sea Army, under the command of Higong, and the 6th Sea Army, under the command of Guyong, followed. They fought all the way to Pyongyang and chased Lee Yong, who had just survived the Gyujing disaster and finally seized the throne and became the King of Korea, to the Yalu River. The reason why it was so simple was not because I was lazy, but because I had no choice. Facing the strength of the Cold Vanguard Division, the entire battle could be summed up in one word: one-sided. All in all, the North Korean army kept running, and the 5-star army kept chasing. Even if the 5-star army didn't chase, the North Korean army would still run. They didn't defend Seoul, and they didn't defend Pyongyang. With the war going on like this, the morale of the North Korean army was already low. It was impossible to organize a counterattack. Lee Illinois brought his important officials Zhang Linji and Han Ming to the Yalu River. His face was still filled with panic. From the start of the war, he received news of cities falling. At first, Lee Illinois was really shocked. Ever since he sent Han Ming to intercept the 5-star army and sink 4 of their ships, he had been waiting for news of them coming to negotiate. Because of this, Lee Illinois couldn't wait to show off his skills in front of the Baiming Emperor. He had even sent an official to the capital of Baiming to report good news to Emperor Daijong. The general idea was that they had succeeded in stopping the 5-star army. Now, they just had to wait for the 5-star army to come. Then they could state their conditions. Actually, from anyone's point of view, this should be the result. Unless the 5-star army didn't want this route anymore, they would have to lower their heads. As for whether the 5-star army would fight head-on, Lee Illinois didn't even think about it. This was his territory. Although North Korea was small, they had more than 300 ships. Once a war started, it wouldn't be so easy to end it. Once it became a protracted war, he had the port and docks to replenish his resources and manpower. Who would he be afraid of? However, he didn't expect the 5-star army to really attack. Not only that, but the North Korean Navy had defeated their navy so quickly, and there was no news at all. The powerful and invincible North Korean Navy in his heart had been completely wiped out. This was already something that Li Ji didn't dare to imagine. What was even more unexpected was that the North Korean army, which usually looked very capable, was so vulnerable in the face of the 5-star army's attack. Each and every one of them was defending a strong city, but they couldn't even withstand a single round of attack. Their cities were broken one after another, and in the end, they even lost the country's capital. Thinking back to when he was on the watchtower of Seoul, he saw the horde of cavalry sweeping over like a storm. Then his soldiers didn't even have the courage to fight back. Every time Lee Illinois thought about this, his body couldn't help but tremble. The 5-star army was actually so powerful. Just their aura alone was enough to disperse the morale of his troops. What a powerful existence this was. Before this, he actually wanted to provoke them. He really didn't know what was good for him. Li Gui didn't know that he had made a huge mistake. He didn't know the true face of Mount Lu and was only fated to be in this mountain. All along, the North Korean military was very weak. They didn't have any real combat experience, so they thought that they were the strongest army in the world. They were busy fighting each other every day, and the training and control of the military were completely based on the situation. The civil officials were busy fighting for power, while the military officials were busy earning money. No one cared about the life and death of the soldiers at the bottom. As a result, the military was already extremely weak. Using a set of data as an example, the North Korean army that reported to Lee Illinois had a total of 150,000 soldiers. This was the so-called standing army. If there was a real war, they could still mobilize 200,000 soldiers from the civilian population. However, more than half of the 150,000 standing troops had been robbed of their pay and salaries. In other words, the generals reported 150,000 soldiers, but in reality, they only had around 60,000 to 70,000 soldiers. This was the total number of people from the Navy and the Army. No matter what, they had such a large territory and so few soldiers. They also didn't have much time to train. Furthermore, they were facing the powerful Lung Feng's army and the world's #1 cavalry division that even Lung Feng admired. Their defeat was already set in stone. After being chased out of his own country, Li Illinois was naturally very angry. Fortunately, he managed to escape and even came to Bai Ming's territory. Walking on this black land, he finally regained some of his confidence. How about this? This king will immediately write a letter to Bai Ming's emperor and ask him to send troops to take back everything for us. In Li Ael's eyes, the great Ming dynasty was still omnipotent, even if it was forced to split into the north and south for some reason. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Furthermore, the leader of the 5-star army was the Duke of Loyalty, personally conferred by the great Ming dynasty's emperor. Li Illinois didn't dare to offend his superior. With his only hope, Li Gui led his officials into the Gaizhou guard office in the Liao capital of northern Ming. At the same time, he wrote an extremely formal letter of credence and had it sent to the capital of northern Ming by the fastest speed possible. Just as Li Illinois was waiting for Bai Ming's emperor to come out and make a decision for him, something unimaginable happened. It was something that he didn't even dare to think about before. Gai Prefecture, which was still the same yesterday, was actually surrounded by armored cavalry today. Naturally, it was the 1st Cavalry Division that Yang Qindong personally conferred. After experiencing the destruction of Kim Bien Dynasty, the destruction of Luzon, and the destruction of North Korea, their forces had suffered losses, and they had not had time to replenish. It seemed that there were only more than 5,000 people, but after a long period of killing, each of them exuded a bloodthirsty aura. Even if they were riding on horses, they would give people a feeling that they were the emissaries of hell. It would make people involuntarily afraid and shudder involuntarily. They suddenly appeared and surrounded the Gai Prefecture guard office. They were ordered by the Heavenly Khan to catch the culprit. Whether it was General Han Mingjin, who commanded the Battle of the Korean Strait, or the new king of North Korea, Li Illinois, who was the instigator behind the battle, they were not caught and brought to justice. This made the Navy soldiers hold their breath. Now it seemed that they had to vent their anger after the great victory. Therefore, Yang Qindong gave the order to catch the main culprit. Even if Li Illinois and the others hid in the Bai Ming guard office, they still couldn't escape the fate of being surrounded. Chapter 938. This was also the first time that the 5-star army had taken the initiative to attack Bai Ming. Although there had been large and small battles before, they had been forced into a corner. Unlike this time, they came openly and acted as if they were going to attack the city if they didn't hand over the captives. The general of the Gai Province Guard was called Lu Song. He was only a Qianhu. The entire city only had 1,000 soldiers and 20,000 civilians. No matter what kind of personality he had, when faced with such a strong army, there was nothing he could do. In the face of this situation, the only thing he could do was to continuously send people to ask for help. He sent people to ask for help from the nearby Jian Province Guard and other guards. He also sent people to ask for help from Bai Ming's capital. At the same time, he didn't forget to send people to negotiate with the 5-star army's cavalry, asking them to give them a few more days. They would think of a way to convince King Li Yong and the others to surrender. Fortunately, Tian, who had received strict orders from Yang Qindong, unless the Bai Ming army took the initiative to attack, it was better to settle the matter peacefully. Now wasn't the time to fall out with Bai Ming. It was because of this order that Tianhu made an exception and didn't immediately make a move. Instead, he gave Lu Song 5 days. If the other side didn't respond by the time was up, then they could only break into the city. When the news reached Gai Province City, Liang's face was naturally filled with fear. He immediately brought 2 important officials to find General Lu Song and asked him to send people to escort him to Baiming's capital. He also said that he was a guest of the Emperor of Baiming. With regards to this request, Lu Song naturally rejected it without even thinking about it. Not to mention that anyone who left the city would have to risk being surrounded and killed by the cavalry of the 1st Cavalry Division. The matter had already been reported. Without the emperor's order, he definitely wouldn't let anyone go. Seeing that this plan was not working, Zhang Linji, who was traveling with them, made another request. That was to defend Gai Zhou City to the death. The other party was all cavalry. They were good at chasing people and were good at charging. But when it came to sieging a city, they were not good at it. Faced with this suggestion, General Lu Song still shook his head. Once the battle starts, the city will definitely fall. As for the reason, you can go up the city gate tower and take a look. The enemy's infantry has already rushed over. Yes, it had only been a day since the 1st Division of Heavenly Cavalry arrived at Gaizhou City on their bicycles. They had firearms in their hands, and each soldier carried 5 grenades with them. Once they gathered them together, what kind of city gate could not be blown open? This wouldn't do, that wouldn't do. Li Gui sadly realized that he was like a piece of fat meat on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. At this moment, his heart was filled with countless regrets. If he had known that the 5-star army was so powerful that even Baiming was so apprehensive, why would he have provoked them for no reason? Now, in order to show his loyalty to Baiming, he had sacrificed himself. Not only did the whole of North Korea fall into the hands of the enemy, but it also seemed that they would have to give up their lives sooner or later. What was the purpose of this? At this moment, it was obviously unrealistic to go out of the city and surrender. After all, they had sunk 4 of the 5-star army's transport ships. Would they let it go so easily? Since he could not surrender, he could only place his hopes on the Northern Ming Emperor. He hoped that the Northern Ming Emperor would give him a hand on account of the fact that he had put in a lot of effort and was unlucky. While waiting, on the 3rd day of the siege, the soldiers from Baiming's guard post arrived one after another. On the 4th day, the number of Baiming soldiers outside Gaizhou City had reached more than 10,000. In terms of numbers, they had already surpassed the 5-star army. But even so, both sides were very restrained and did not have any intention of attacking. Whether it was the 1st Regiment or the 2nd Regiment of the 4th Regiment, of course they would not bother to attack. Since they said that they would give the enemy 5 days, they would not take the initiative to attack before the 5 days were up. The soldiers from Baiming's guard post were completely different. Although it seemed that they had the advantage in numbers, they did not dare to underestimate the enemy in front of them. Although they had not fought yet, they had a feeling that if they did, they would be the ones to lose. Because of this, many of the Baiming generals who came to reinforce Gaizhou City thought that it would be best if the emperor did not protect these defeated North Korean soldiers. They did not want to bring disaster to themselves because of a moment of righteousness. The result also proved that their emperor was wise and did not use righteousness. On the 5th night of the siege of Gaizhou City, the emperor's decree finally arrived. The general idea was that North Korea had provoked the 5-star army. Now, they were just seeking revenge. The people still said that a debt must be paid and a life must be paid for. As the emperor, it was not good for him to interfere. In short, Daizong did not care about anything related to North Korea. Speaking of which, this result was not unexpected. The North Korean Navy had taken the initiative to ambush the 5-star army's transport ship, which caused them to be angered. In a short period of time, they had taken the initiative to destroy a country. What kind of military strength did they display? At this moment, why would Baiming stand out and make an enemy out of the 5-star army? No matter what, Yang Qindong was still the great Ming dynasty's loyal duke. On the surface, they were still one family. Moreover, the facts had already proven that the other party had no intention of attacking them. Since that was the case, why did they have to interfere and make things difficult for themselves? What Bai Ming wanted to do now was not to go head-to-head with the five-star army. Instead, they wanted to defeat Yeshen and Walla to prove their strength. Then, they would go down south to defeat the South Ming dynasty and unify the Great Ming dynasty. At that time, they would have a chance to repeat the Great Ming dynasty's glory. At that time, it would be time to consider getting rid of the five-star army. At this moment, they could not complicate matters. This was not only Zhu Qiu's idea, it was also the idea of the court's civil and military officials. However, these officials also made a request. That was, they could not casually hand over the people, and North Korea could not be casually given away. After all, North Korea was a vassal state appointed by the Great Ming dynasty's Emperor Tizu. It was not right for them to be taken advantage of like this. Therefore, if the five-star army insisted on occupying this place, could they consider giving them some war horses? This way, they would have some face, and Bai Ming would also have an explanation to the people of the world. Naturally, there were already messengers regarding this request that had already passed through Gaizhou City and went straight to the capital of North Korea. This kind of private transaction would definitely not be explained to Li Meng and the others. No matter what, this was a disgraceful matter. With the emperor's decree, General Liu Song breathed a sigh of relief. The Bai Ming reinforcements that came from outside the city also breathed a sigh of relief. Then Li Meng and the others were dragged out of their beds by the Bai Ming army in the middle of the night and sent out of the city to the five-star army. With the goal achieved and the people in his hands, Tian Hu waved his hand and the five-star army withdrew overnight. The conflict at the border thus ended and peace returned. However, the impact of this matter did not disappear. The five-star army that came to Bai Ming's territory was as free as their own backyard. This more or less gave the Bai Ming generals a lot of pressure and warnings. It even had a big impact on the morale of the army. This caused a natural imbalance between the two sides when they met in the future. Of course, this was a matter for later. Li Meng, Zhang Linji, Han Mingjin, and the others were brought back to Seoul. Then, in the largest square in Seoul, they were beheaded in public. This scene was seen by many North Koreans, but most of them were angry but did not dare to say anything. Some people did not even have the courage to be angry. Just like when he occupied other small countries, Yang Qindong adopted the same policy here. Voluntarily surrendering and cooperating with the five-star army could keep one's life safe, and only half of one's property could be handed over. If there were any resistance, they would be killed or sentenced to a few dozen years of labor. Because it was the North Korean Navy that provoked the five-star army first, these few rules were enforced very strictly. Often, if there were any resistance, they would not be judged according to their crimes. They would be beheaded as a warning to everyone. Because of this, in just a few days, thousands of heads fell to the ground in the capital of Seoul. Many officials' families were also exterminated. Not a single person was left alive. Under the oppressive policy of the five-star army, the other officials and influential people were in a state of panic. They did not know if the next misfortune would fall on their heads. Yang Qindong had thought about this oppressive policy many times before making the decision. He was not a bloodthirsty person. What he did was to fulfill the great dream in his heart. Every time he saw the faint 5 stars on his arm, he became more determined in his dream. Although he did not want to kill, he had no choice but to do so. This time, the North Korean Navy provoked the 5-star army. If they were not punished, wouldn't the other factions follow suit next time? Thus, this time he had to be ruthless. It could be considered a serious warning to everyone. In addition, he had already made all sorts of preparations. He had already moved the people from other regions to North Korea, and all the people who were not friendly to the 5-star army were all moved out. With such a big change of blood, the North Korean people would be torn apart in the future. In the end, it would be difficult for them to achieve anything. Even if things were a little extreme, there was no need to worry too much. Thus, under this oppressive attitude, many people would die in North Korea every day. More people wanted to live, so their attitude changed. From the initial soft resistance to the current full cooperation and cooperation. Lee Min-ho was one of the most typical officials. He was originally a subordinate of the North Korean king, Lee Hong-gu. However, he did not expect Lee Gu to take care of his master and become king. Because of this, he lost the power in his hands. He was forced to stand on the side and would not have a chance to rise again in this life. However, no one would have thought that Lee Gu would face such a disaster right after he ascended the throne. Now that Lee Gu and his officials were all killed, officials like Lee Min-ho had a chance to come out again. Chapter 939. Lee Min-ho was originally a person with a flexible mind. While others were worried about whether their heads would still be hanging on their necks tomorrow, Lee Min-ho was thinking more about how to use this opportunity to establish a relationship with the Five-Star Army and then become an important minister of North Korea after the reform. In fact, he had such a condition. Before the Five-Star Army attacked North Korea, because he had a high position in the army, he was the director of the Five-Star Army's Security Bureau in North Korea. Yukon took the initiative to contact him, and he sold some information to him. It could be said that they had some economic dealings. But later, the smart Lee Min-ho found out that some of Yuken's interests had nothing to do with being a businessman. The other party kept saying that he wanted to do business, so he wanted to know the layout of the North Korean military. But if he was doing business, why would he have such worries? Although Yuken was involved in an underground business, Lee Min-ho felt that Yuken lacked the unscrupulous aura of a businessman. Therefore, he spent a lot of effort to investigate Yuken. Although he didn't find any evidence, he could see that this person's identity was suspicious from many aspects. Logically speaking, if Lee Min-ho wanted to arrest someone in North Korea, he didn't even need a reason. But for Yuken, not only did he not do that, he even stopped all the investigation, as if nothing had happened. The two of them continued their relationship, and if possible, he even took the initiative to provide some convenient conditions for the other party. What kind of person was Yuken? When he faced the shrewd Sher Wanshan in Telecity, he didn't even frown. He was very cautious, and there were many well-trained intelligence elites under him. Lee Min-ho sent people to investigate him, and soon found out, and then he was ready to kill him to silence him. But then he found that this person was very tactful. Seeing that Hai Erjuan's attack was imminent in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he stopped killing him and let him escape. After conquering the entire North Korea, the situation was in chaos. At this moment, Yuken thought of Lee Min-ho again. This time he publicly looked for Lee Min-ho and revealed his identity. He hoped that Lee Min-ho could cooperate with his work to clear the assets of the officials and aristocratic families in Seoul. Although the Intelligence Bureau also had some information, without the help of a local snake, a lot of work would inevitably take some detours. Yuken turned out to be a member of the Five-Star Army and an important member. This made Lee Min-ho, who had a headache over the current situation and didn't even know what to do next, overjoyed. He immediately took the initiative to accept this task. Under his leadership, many hidden rich families in Seoul were uncovered and helped the mercenaries collect 2 million taels of silver. It could be said that he had made a lot of contributions. It must be said that Lee Min-ho was really good at doing things. After doing so many good deeds in a row, he didn't have the intention to ask for a reward. He still behaved properly, and even according to the rules of the Five-Star Army, he took the initiative to hand over half of his family's assets. Not only that, Lee Min-ho knew that if he wanted to gain a foothold in the new government, relying on this alone was not enough. He also needed to have his own people in the Five-Star Palace, preferably his own family. Then, who was his own family? Of course, his family was the best. Fortunately, Li Minhao was also a talented man when he was young. Because of his background, his wife was also very beautiful. More importantly, he gave birth to a daughter who was as beautiful as a fairy. How to take the opportunity to give himself 7 good sons-in-law to strengthen the Li family in the future became a problem that he needed to consider. In order to catch a rich husband, Li Minhao first sent his daughter to the dance school opened by the 5-star army to learn how to dance. Then he hired a few Chinese teachers at a high price to make the best use of the time to tutor his daughter. He also found some people who were familiar with Han etiquette to be teachers of etiquette. After that, he began to wait for the opportunity to come. After successfully conquering the entire territory of North Korea and killing the new king, Li Ji, they established a new supply route in the future. The supplies did not need to enter the sea town. They could directly go ashore at the port of North Korea and then enter Liaodong through the Yellow River and then enter Shurching. Under the great success, Luan Xiaoyu, who came with the transport ship, proposed to hold a social ball. It could not only help the brothers who fought on the battlefield to relax and create some opportunities for their marriage, it could also ease the tense atmosphere in Seoul, and at the same time it could also improve the relationship with some of the representatives of the local forces. Yang Qindong knew very well that for every land that was conquered, whether they could stand firm or not did not depend on the degree of recognition of the people at the beginning, but whether these influential people cooperated or not. In addition, this was Luan Xiaoyu's request. After thinking about it, he agreed and completely handed over the preparation work of the banquet. Luan Xiaoyu, who received the agreement, was of course very happy. She immediately opened a temporary dance school to teach some of the North Korean officials women dance. Then she took out the equipment that had been prepared long ago and prepared to organize a decent ball. When the news spread, Li Minhao knew that the opportunity that he had been waiting for had appeared. If he could take this opportunity to find a good husband for his daughter, it would be equivalent to finding a good backer for the Li family. At that time, who would dare to bully them? Therefore, he spent a lot of effort to dress up his daughter well. Li Zhenju was Li Minhao's daughter. She was indeed very beautiful. She had the quiet beauty that was unique to the Korean people. She was 1.66 meters tall, and her gorgeous clothes made her figure even more perfect. In addition, she had learned the so-called social dance very well and danced very well. This time, she was confident that she would shine in the ball and achieve the most dazzling goal. In fact, it wasn't just Li Minhao who was doing this. Many Korean families and clans were also making similar preparations. They found the most beautiful young girls in their clans and prepared to use them as marriage bonds. At the same time, some of the young masters of these clans were also making preparations. They wanted to see if there was any opportunity to get in touch with some high-ranking officers of the 5-star army. If they could form a friendship, it would be beneficial for the future development of their clans. But in such a clan, there was also an outlier. His name was Han Chong. He was a young master in his early 20s who looked quite handsome. For a long time, Han Chong was a hot topic among the younger generation. Not only did this person have a good appearance, but most importantly, he was well-read and also had good skills. How to say it? A person who was well-versed in both literature and martial arts described this kind of person. His family background was good. He was related to Han Mingjin, who had been sentenced to death. He was also a capable person. Under the influence of the great Ming dynasty's Confucianism, he knew all the 4 books and 5 classics. It could be said that he was very talented. In addition, he had learned martial arts. His body was strong and he looked good. It was impossible for him to keep a low profile. If it weren't for the Korean Navy provoking the 5-star army, people like Han Chong would have stood out sooner or later. It was inevitable that he would become a pillar of the Korean kingdom in the future. Such a young master naturally attracted the attention of a group of young girls. Once upon a time, he and Li Zhenju were said to be a pair. A talented man and a beautiful woman were so harmonious. Some people even said that they were a match made in heaven. But now everything was over. Since the defeat of the Korean army, there had been no contact between the two. But the story of the two who were lucky to survive was not over. At least Han Chang thought so. He really liked Li Jinju and wanted to marry this person. For this matter, he had recently visited the Li family several times, but unfortunately he was stopped for various reasons. Compared to Li Minheo, who couldn't help but smile when he saw Han Chang before, he actually closed his eyes and refused to see Han Chang. This already explained the problem. At least he would not agree to his daughter's relationship with Han Chang, which made him very depressed. Han Chang didn't want to fail. He wanted to continue to look for opportunities, and this ball was his opportunity. For his marriage happiness, he had a bold idea. That was to show his love in public at the ball. In this way, perhaps someone would stand up and take advantage of her beauty. He could achieve his wish and hold the beauty. With Han Chang's background, his family got 3 tickets to the ball. With his outstanding performance, his father, Han Zhao, who was also the head of the family, decided to take him to the ball. It was just that before he went, he had told him to be honest in the ball venue. He heard that even the Duke of Loyalty would participate. He should not make trouble. Otherwise, if he provoked the anger of others, not only would he hurt himself, but he was afraid that even the entire Han family would not get any benefits. Han Chang naturally agreed to his father's words. But God knew that his heart had already flown to the ball, to Li Jinju, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. The location of the ball was decided by Luan Xiaoyu. She chose the largest Tianyang Hall in the North Korean palace, except for the main hall. She first ordered people to move away some of the useless things, creating a large central area. Then, she ordered people to prepare wine and other things. She wanted to make the environment of this banquet into a buffet. Back in Crimson City, Yang Qindong had done it once in the palace. That time he had invited some important members of the city. After Luan Xiaoyu participated, she felt that it was quite good. In the banquet, people could find people they were interested in to chat with. They could improve their friendship through chatting. At the same time, it showed the luxurious and colorful side of life. It could be said that young people were very yearning for it. Holding the banquet here could let the North Koreans see their strength. It could also play a big role in the unification of 10,000 hearts. Chapter 940. Luan Xiaoyu was the future 6th madam, and she was the type that was set in stone. At the same time, she was the boss of the entire publicity department, and she was also the top sister of the 5-person investigation team in Crimson City. If she decided to do something, who would dare to stop her? Everything was carried out according to her instructions. Yang Qindong already had some understanding of this matter, but he did not say anything about it. Since Xiaoyu liked it, he would let her do as she pleased. If this ball could let the North Koreans see the power and prosperity of the Yang family and make them yearn for it, it would be a great thing. Of course, what he cared about was the family of the officers. According to the rules of the 5-star army, an officer could apply for marriage as long as 2 of the 3 conditions were met. First, they had to have joined the 5-star army for more than 2 years. Second, their position had to be at least a battalion commander. Third, their military rank had to be at least a major. As long as 2 of the 3 conditions were met, they could start a family. They could even take in concubines. Of course, for the mid-level officers of the 5-star army, their first wife had to be a Han. This was not an exception. However, if they really liked a woman, they could take in a concubine if she was not a Han. This was also a way to increase their Han genes. In the future, the Han men would become more handsome and the women would become more beautiful. Joining the 5-star army, which was the earliest mercenary group, was a busy start. Other than fighting everywhere, the internal competition was also very fierce. If you did not move forward, you might be surpassed by others and then replaced. No one wanted their hard work to be wasted, so they could only work harder. Over time, some officers did not have the chance to solve their personal problems. Perhaps the ball was a good way. Not only did they have to let the horse run, but they also had to let the horse eat good grass and feed it fine fodder. This was Yang Qindong's standard of doing things. Although the competition for all levels of officers in Yang Xie's forces was very fierce, and there were many things to do every day, but correspondingly, they also received a lot in return. In the past, they were treated well in terms of money and treatment. Now, the way of the ball was a kind of care and concern in life. North Korea's new provincial governor was already in place. His name was Zhang Yi, and he had once worked in Chisun City's city, Lord Manor. Reality had already proven his ability, and this time he had transferred one of city, Lord Yu Qian's trusted subordinates to be in charge of North Korea. Under Yang Qindong's instructions, Zhang Yi participated in the preparation work of the ball. He invited who he invited and what he had to say to the people he invited. This was a great help for Zhang Yi to understand the situation here faster. In the end, under Zhang Yi's ample preparation, other than the officers and officers of the 5-star army, a total of more than 100 local clans were invited to the ball. In total, the number of participants exceeded 300. Fortunately, the Heavenly Sun Hall occupied a large enough area. Otherwise, with a total of 600 to 700 people, the ball wouldn't be able to satisfy them. After many days of preparation, the day finally arrived. The time of the ball was set for the evening of the same day. After dinner, many well-dressed young ladies went out of the door in a carriage under the leadership of the patriarch and went straight in the direction of the palace. The sky was already dark, and in the darkness, 2 shadows silently watched all of this from not far from the main entrance of the palace. But soon they were disappointed. The inspection here was very strict. Not only did they have to check the application, but also some officials who were very familiar with Seoul were here to screen the identity of the people who came here to prevent any unruly people from sneaking in. Thinking about it, since even Yang Qindong was going to participate, this ball, which was still fresh to people, must be of extremely high quality. It was reasonable for the security to be stricter. The inspection was very serious. The people who entered were also searched, but even so, the people who could enter actively cooperated. It can be seen that their hearts were already leaning towards the 5-star army. Big brother, it seems that we have no chance to sneak in. One of the 2 shadows in the darkness said, "That's right. But second brother, we don't have to be discouraged. As long as we work hard, there will always be opportunities. A ball like this will definitely not satisfy everyone. Once someone is treated unfairly and has anger in his heart, it will be an opportunity for us to take advantage of. You have to know, since King Nanming sent us brothers here, it means that he has high hopes for us. We must not let the king down." In the darkness, another man made his own voice. From the sound of his voice, it was very calm, showing that he had a good psychological quality. The big brother's name was Guo Xinqing, and the second brother's name was Li Qingsong. They were sent by the former king Min Zhuang, the current king Nanming, Zhu Huijin. After the 5-star army launched an attack on the Kim Bian dynasty, Zhu Huijin also took the opportunity to declare himself as King Nanming. He first sent troops to deal with King Shiping in Yunnan. He wanted to expand his own efforts and clean up the enemies behind him. When King Nanming made his move, Zhu Qijin of the southern Ming dynasty quickly made his move. He sent out 200,000 troops and launched a pincer attack with King Shiping. In the beginning, it was fine. King Nanming, who had a certain amount of preparation, was able to withstand it. He even won some local battles. However, as time went by, King Nanming's various disadvantages became obvious. For example, the time he spent building his forces was still too short. His foundation was not enough, his financial resources were not enough, and his reserve army was not enough. In addition, he was originally a rebel and did not have the support of the people. After dozens of battles, he began to feel the strain. If the war continued like this, without the influence of external forces, he was afraid that the person who would lose in the end would be him. In order to protect himself and to change the situation, King Nanming began to think. In the end, he set his sights on Yang Qindong. There were already a few groups of Han people coming out of Qiqian City. They could not be a monolithic block. From their mouths, some of the things about Qiqian City had been learned by too many people. They also knew that the real leader of the five-star army was Yang Qindong, who was known as the sixth young master of the Yang family. This was something that no one expected. After all, it had always been a mystery how this person had developed. However, this was the truth. There was no room for other people to doubt it. As the five-star army went to war again and again, their forces and territory continued to expand. He had become a person that everyone had to pay attention to. If the five-star army's strength was not too strong, they would have become the target of public criticism. King Nanming was also afraid of the five-star army's strength and did not dare to have any ideas about this army. However, that did not mean that he did not dare to have any ideas about Yang Qindong. In his opinion, if an accident happened to this person, the entire world would fall into chaos again. In that case, he would be able to take advantage of the situation. In order to achieve this goal, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong, two powerful people, were sent to North Korea. Their mission was to find an opportunity to assassinate Yang Qindong. It would be best if they could kill him. If they could not, they would stir up chaos and anger the loyal duke. Then, they would put the seed of hatred on Nanming. The reason why King Nanming was so confident was because Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong had another public identity. They were small leaders of the Nanming Imperial Guards. He had spent a lot of effort and a lot of money to buy them over. In other words, even if their identities were exposed, Yang Qindong would only hate Zhu Qijin. It would have nothing to do with them. If they could really provoke the five-star army, the pressure on them would be greatly reduced. It would be a great opportunity for them to expand their territory and influence. Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong thus came to North Korea through a secret channel. However, they were disappointed that they could not get close to their target. Since the assassination attempt at the Yongding sect in Baiming's capital, Yang Qindong's security had been strengthened. Usually when he went out, he was surrounded by people. There were even several carriages when he went out, making it difficult for people to distinguish which carriage he was in. When they couldn't find an opportunity, they accidentally heard about the ball. The two brothers wanted to come out and try their luck. Unfortunately, when they saw the inspection at the entrance of the palace, they knew that there was no chance for them to sneak into the palace. They could only wait. In the palace, more and more guests arrived. After going through many strict inspections, they entered the palace and came to the Tianyang Hall. This place was already brightly lit. As soon as they entered the hall, the melodious sound entered their ears. It was a very lively light music. The sound system was also good. There were also various kinds of lights in the hall. Naturally, they were all from a large warehouse. In Qian City, Yang Qindong took out a few sets, and one of them was brought to North Korea by Luan Xiaoyu. The generator was running at high speed to ensure the smooth flow of electricity. In the territory occupied by Yangxia, a large amount of crude oil had been found. After purification, gasoline, diesel, and other things were no longer scarce. There was no problem in supplying electricity for a while. When those lights were lit up, it was as bright as day. It really gave the North Korean officials who saw all this for the first time a strong visual impact. These North Korean officials, who were usually high and mighty, had to lower their heads when looking at people at this moment, were like Granny Lu entering the Grand View Garden. They looked left and right with a face full of curiosity, surprise, shock, and envy. The young people who came with their parents were shocked by everything in front of them to the extent that they couldn't breathe and didn't know what to say. How could their spicy pickles compare to the dazzling array of delicacies on the menu? How could their kerosene lamps and high-grade candlesticks compare to the bright lights? Chapter 941. On both sides of the hall, there were crystal clear glass cups covered with a layer of high-grade white cloth. They were probably expensive, right? There were also drinks of various colors in the cups, which were beyond their knowledge. Even some self-proclaimed scholars didn't know what to call them at this moment. There was also the rhythmic light music. Although it was their first time hearing it, everyone had the same appreciation for beauty. What made people hesitate was that they only heard the music, but didn't see the appearance of the band. What the hell was this? It seemed that everyone who entered would first have a face of doubt, then shock, and finally numbness. There were even many people who had a very cautious expression on their faces. No wonder the 5-star army was so powerful and could occupy the entire North Korea in such a short period of time. They had too many unknown things in their hands. With these, no country could compete with them. Even the great Ming dynasty, which had always been high and mighty in their eyes, was far inferior to them. In the Heavenly Sun Hall, there were waitresses in white novelty shirts, walking back and forth. They all had good figures and good appearances. They were the service staff of this ball, and several of them were agents of the CIA. Sometimes their eyes would casually sweep across the hall, but in fact, they were screening all kinds of people. In a while, the 6th young master would arrive. This was the god in their hearts. The god's safety must not be the slightest mistake. Otherwise, their immediate superior, the 5th madam, would impose additional punishment on them. It would be a punishment for them to regret being born into this world. After most of the people attending the ball had arrived, a group of soldiers wearing military uniforms walked in. They were all tall and had boundless killing intent on their bodies, causing many of the young masters and young ladies to show fear on their faces. After these soldiers appeared, they once again carefully checked the big and small corners of the entire Heavenly Sun Hall. After confirming that there was no danger, they hid in the darkness. When everyone saw this scene, they knew that the great Ming dynasty's Duke of Loyalty was about to appear. Sure enough, less than 10 minutes later, Yang Qindong appeared. As if to match the atmosphere of the cocktail party, he did not wear a green robe. Instead, he changed into a pure white Chinese tunic suit, which set off his valiant figure, made him look handsome and tall. Following Yang Qindong was Luan Xiaoyu, who was wearing a red evening dress. This red dress, which was tailor-made for her, made her look even more beautiful. Luan Xiaoyu's skin, with light makeup, also looked much fairer in the red dress. Coupled with the design of the dress, it made her figure look even more graceful. As soon as she appeared, she attracted the attention of many men. In contrast, those North Korean girls who seemed to be carefully dressed were dwarfed. This couldn't be helped. They didn't have the best advisor like Yang Qindong. They were conservative and didn't know how to show their advantages. How could they be compared? When Yang Qindong and Luan Xiaoyu, this golden couple, appeared, it immediately attracted a burst of applause. Then Yang Qindong took a wine glass from the hands of a waitress who was wandering around the venue. He raised the glass of red wine and nodded to the people who attended the banquet. At this moment, Yang Qindong seemed to have returned to the moment when he participated in the banquet and completed the mission in his previous life. The only difference was that he didn't have a dangerous assassination mission to do. The difference was that the clothes of the people who attended the banquet were different, but in the end, it seemed to be inharmonious with the atmosphere of the banquet. Naturally, this feeling was only shared by Yang Qindong. He had seen too many so-called successful people wearing suits and bow ties. He had also seen too many women who should be revealing, and even women who were revealing for the sake of revealing. After seeing the tightly wrapped officers and North Korean men and women, he couldn't help but feel a sense of inharmony. Yang Qindong raised his glass. The officers and North Korean officials were shocked and quickly found their glasses and raised their hands. In the process, because some people walked too fast, they almost fell to the ground, which also caused bursts of laughter. However, Yang Qindong didn't care about this. Instead, he smiled at those who almost made a fool of themselves. The meaning of encouragement was very obvious. Who knew how much loyalty he had gained from just this gaze alone? Everyone raised their glasses. Yang Qindong gently raised his left hand. The music stopped, and the audience became quiet. At this moment, his deep baritone voice sounded. "Everyone, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend this banquet. You're too polite. What are you talking about? It's our honor to be able to attend this banquet." That's right, that's right. This is the face that you've given us. We can't thank you enough." All kinds of voices came from below. Without exception, all of them came to express their goodwill. It seemed that if they didn't say something, they couldn't express their excitement at this moment. In this regard, Yang Qindong smiled and nodded gently. After that, he continued to say, "Everyone, the former North Korean kingdom no longer exists. It has been replaced by the North Korean province. Next, Zhang Yi will be the first governor of the North Korean province. Zhang Yi is a person with outstanding ability. I believe that with his leadership, North Korea will soon become powerful and rich." Clatter, clatter, clatter. Amidst another round of applause, Zhang Yi walked out from the crowd and nodded to thank the crowd. "Zhang Yi is indeed a good leader. I asked him to come here and work. I asked him if he had any requests. The first thing he said was that food is the most important thing for the people. He asked to reduce the price of food and solve the problem of the 2 million people in North Korea first. Since he's here to preside over the overall situation, I have to support him. There's no need to say anything. Sell the food at 20% of the pre-war price. I believe that there won't be a problem for the people to eat." Yang Qindong said with a smile, but these words shocked the North Korean officials who attended the banquet. North Korea was originally an agricultural country. Although it was close to the sea, most people still made a living by farming. Therefore, the price of food had always been very low. It was only because of the recent war that North Korea changed. The people were afraid that something would happen, so they began to stockpile food to ensure their safety. But now, Yang Qindong not only stabilized the price of food, but also sold it at 20% of the pre-war price. How low would the price be? It was almost the same as the country's harvest price. It was not an exaggeration to say that the situation in North Korea would quickly stabilize once this policy was implemented. After all, the problem of food and clothing was solved, which was equivalent to solving the most unstable factor. Everything would be much easier to do next. This decision was made because of Yangtze's development in the past few years. Chichen City had always believed in walking on many legs. While developing industry and commerce, they did not fall behind in agriculture. For example, in Vietnam, Laos, and most of Ryukyu Island, all the land that could be developed was planted with food. In the spirit of paying taxes according to the proportion of the harvest of the land, this greatly increased the enthusiasm of the farmers. The income was directly linked to the output, and it was no longer a fixed land tax. Whoever planted more food would get more. They were no longer farming for the country, but for themselves. The enthusiasm of the people was unprecedentedly high, and a large number of wastelands were reclaimed. In addition, any farmer could apply for a loan from the local government to borrow cattle and farming tools. In the past 2 to 3 years, the weather was good, and the farmers had gained a lot of land. The granaries of several provinces had also been enriched. Now was the time to show the results. It was not difficult to transfer a part of the food from there to North Korea, but the benefits to the people were real. There was a saying among the people, "If there is food at home, there is no need to panic." As long as the basic livelihood of the people was guaranteed, the people's hearts would be stable, and they would not be easily defeated by some things. The establishment of the North Korean provincial government would be more stable, and it would be much easier to implement other measures. Once Yang Bao succeeded in gaining a foothold and enjoyed enough influence among the people, the law would be more deeply rooted in the people's hearts. The people would not be bullied, and their hearts would be stable. It would not be long before North Korea could exert its power and emit its unique spring. The reforms in Ryukyu Island, Laos, and Vietnam had proved everything. As long as they followed their pace, it was only a matter of time before they became strong. This was the bright path that Yang Qindong pointed out for the development of the place, a path of success that had been verified by later generations with facts. After the public announcement of the food problem today, the situation in North Korea would soon be stable again. This was already a visible fact. Yang Qindong had a confident smile at the corner of his mouth. Under his influence, the mood of the people attending the ball became more cheerful. Well, with the development of the previous dynasty's Xian province, Governor Jiang Yi will lead the provincial government to work hard with all of you. Then, let's toast to a better tomorrow. Yang Qindong raised his glass, and all the people in uniform at the ball raised their goblets high. They had to give face to the sixth young master. Next were the local representatives of North Korea. One by one, they raised their glasses with joy. Yang Qindong drank all the red wine in one gulp, then said with a smile, "Well, it's time to dance. Let's dance." After saying that, he first made a gesture of invitation to his dance partner, Luan Xiaoyu, in a very gentlemanly manner. Luan Xiaoyu's cheeks were slightly red, and there was an intoxicating smile in her eyes. She gently put her palm on Yang Qindong's hand, and then the music started. The two of them danced gracefully, like two butterflies walking into the field. When the ball began, a group of officers also walked into the field. They had received a short period of special information before, so they knew a little about ballroom dancing. Now was the time for them to perform and see the results. Chapter 942. Of course, there were those who didn't. Among the officers, there were those who liked dancing, and there were also those who didn't. But no matter what, this was the sixth madam's idea, and the sixth young master agreed to it. Just based on this point alone, no one would refuse to give face. Regardless of whether they liked it or not, they could only brace themselves and support it. For example, one of the high-ranking officers, Tian Hu, was someone who didn't really like dancing. As the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian, who had been in the limelight recently, he and his division's combat strength was admired by even the most arrogant Lung Feng. He was one of the few officers in the mixed army who could be treated with respect. However, not many people thought about how much effort the 1st Cavalry Division had put in to achieve their current results. When others were resting, they didn't rest. When others were resting, they didn't choose to rest. When others were resting after a big battle, they still continued to train like a raging fire. It was as if they were born to fight. It was because of his hard work and dedication that they were able to achieve results that only firearms could achieve with cold weapons. Recently, the situation in North Korea had become more and more stable. Many of the armies had entered a period of rest. Even Lung Feng's training only lasted for 4 hours in the morning, for hours in the afternoon, and 10 kilometers in the evening. However, only the 1st Cavalry Division continued to train on horseback. They practiced chopping and chopping on horseback. They used wooden swords in the practice. But even so, it was very easy for them to be lightly injured if they were chopped on a high-speed horse. Because of this, at least 10% of the cavalry was injured and didn't have the chance to return. This kind of training was a very self-consuming training method. The abnormal decrease in the number of soldiers had caused the 3 regimental commanders under him to complain incessantly. There were even people who reported this matter to Yang Qindong. If this was a peaceful era, this kind of training would indeed be a little too much. But now the world was already in chaos. No matter how powerful the 5-star army was, they would still have to face all kinds of provocations at any time. The influence of a strong army would be very great. In the end, Yang Qindong didn't criticize Tian Hu at all. Instead, he was very satisfied with Tian Hu's way of handling things. Not only did he scold the officer who came to complain, he even stripped him of his military uniform and transferred him to the local area to work. Yang Qindong's support gave Tian Hu a lot of confidence and courage. This was also the biggest reason why the 1st Cavalry Division was like a ferocious tiger on the battlefield without any opponents. After all, Tian, who used to be one of his students, he was a talent who excelled in both the pen and the sword. Yang Qindong believed that Tian, whose training should be targeted. As for injuries during training, it was originally unavoidable. It only proved that one's strength wasn't up to expectations. In order to make the best use of the sharp sword in his hand, Yang Qindong gave another order to allow Tian Hu to continue expanding the army. The soldiers could be selected from the entire army. In the end, there would be 5 regiments, with each regiment having 2,000 soldiers, a total of 10,000 soldiers. Yang Qindong even publicly stated that once the 1st Cavalry Division expanded from the current 6,000 soldiers to 10,000, he would personally confer the rank of Major General to Tian Hu. A division commander could actually obtain the rank of general. This was a special case in the entire 5-star army. Tian Hu would break another record. Because of this, Tian Hu was naturally very excited. As a warrior, he had dreamed of becoming a general when he first joined the army. Now that his dream was about to come true, all he had to do was work harder to repay everything he had received. Along with the arrival of a higher honor, there was also a corresponding pressure. The difficulty of expanding the 1st Cavalry Division was no less than the expansion of the cold front. Especially this time, there were actually more than 4,000 soldiers. It was almost the same size as when the 1st Cavalry Division was first established. As a division commander, Tian Hu's workload was naturally very heavy. At this time, the 6th Madam informed him to attend the ball. It was obvious that Tian Hu was very unwilling, but he had to come. Tian Hu used to be one of Yang Qindong's students. He came into contact with new things like ballroom dancing early. When he first started learning, he was also one of the people who danced well. If he had nothing to do, he wouldn't reject this kind of ball. In fact, he would even welcome it. But this time, after Yang Qindong finished speaking, he drank a glass of red wine and sat in a corner with his head lowered to think. The 6th young master had high hopes for him and the 1st Cavalry Division. How could he not disappoint the 6th young master? He had to do things well, quickly complete the expansion of the 1st Cavalry Division, and maintain the original combat strength. He had to seriously consider these things. However, even with his head lowered, the 2 stripes and 4 stars on his uniform were still as dazzling as ever. It was as if he was the sun that was shining brightly. It was impossible to ignore it even if he wanted to. At this moment, there were more than 10 pairs of eyes staring in this direction. Among them, there was even a young girl who was walking towards this corner. These 10 pairs of eyes belonged to the daughters of the big families in North Korea. They knew very well what their mission was tonight. The fate of the entire family was tied to them. While they were feeling the pressure, their expressions were naturally very focused. All the high-ranking officers and some high-ranking cadres in the field had become their prey. For example, Yu Guang, the commander of the 2nd Maritime Army, his 3 division commanders, Dingyang, Higong, and Guyang, as well as the new governor of North Korea, Jang Yi, and several high-ranking officials of the provincial government had all become their hunting targets. These people were even surrounded by a crowd of women. How could Tian Hu, who was also a senior colonel, avoid them? Although his killing intent didn't diminish, it didn't stop people from approaching. Didn't they see that his 3 division commanders, Temu, Lu Duo, and Hubo, were already surrounded by beautiful women? The girl walking towards Tian, who was Li Minho's most beautiful daughter, Li Jinju. Originally, she had already made preparations, but Han Chang's sudden appearance disrupted her original plan. After much difficulty, she managed to brush him off perfunctorily to the side. The few targets that she had been keeping an eye on were already surrounded by other girls. She had no choice but to look at Tian Hu. Even though she felt that this person wasn't easy to get along with, when she thought of the mission her father had given her and how she carried the hope of her family, she still walked over without hesitation. At first, Li Jinju's footsteps were very quick, as if she was afraid that someone else would steal her target. However, as she got closer and closer to Tian, who was sitting in the corner, the feeling of nervousness and apprehension grew stronger and stronger. Women in ancient times were very conservative and reserved. They paid more attention to the orders of their parents and the words of the matchmaker. Many women didn't even step out of the house when they were young. They would only know the appearance of the man they were marrying when they were actually married. In the present day, this was undoubtedly a very sad thing. But at that time, it was a common thing, so when she took the initiative to walk towards Tian, who, it could be imagined how much courage it took to do this. Originally, he was still thinking about things with his head down, but as Li Jinju got closer and closer, Tian, who finally had a reaction. He raised his head and saw a girl with a very nervous face, but her appearance could be called very beautiful. Li Jinju did have a certain capital, whether it was appearance or identity. She was a superior person. At this moment, her nervousness made her like a budding flower, and people couldn't help but look at her twice. Tian, who raised his head, was indeed amazed by Li Jinju's appearance, but in less than a breath of time, he returned to normal. He also understood the other party's intention, then shook his head gently and said, "I'm sorry, I'm thinking about something now, and I don't want anyone to disturb me." "No, please don't refuse, otherwise I may die after this banquet." When Li Jinju heard Tian's refusal, it was as if her head was hit with a stick, and then tears flowed from her eyes uncontrollably. Li Jinju wasn't exaggerating. She had taken the initiative to look for Tian Hu, and many people must have seen it. If she returned empty-handed, she didn't know how many unpleasant words would be spread out tonight. For a very pure girl like her, these kinds of words were terrible, and she was even more afraid. She, who didn't complete the task, perhaps did not need to wait for her father to scold her. She would use her own way to end her life. Yes, there were many women in that era who sacrificed themselves for the name of loyalty. This was the style and characteristics of that era. You could say that they were ignorant, or that they lacked education, but the truth was the truth, and it couldn't be changed. Originally, he wanted to put on a fierce face and scare the other party. Tian, who believed that when he put on a cold face, even the elite soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division would feel afraid. He didn't believe that he couldn't scare a woman away. But after seeing Li Jinju cry, and her appearance was so distressing, even his frozen heart couldn't help but beat twice at this moment. He knew that he couldn't refuse this woman today. "Oh, okay, then I'll dance with you. It's just that I haven't danced for a long time, so I might be a little rusty." The general agreed, and Li Jinju was naturally very happy. Her small face immediately turned from crying to smiling. "I just learned it not long ago, and I'm not very good at dancing." "Ha, good. Then we're about the same weight. Let's not laugh at each other, please." Tian, who was amused by Li Jinju's manner of speaking. After laughing, he stood up and stretched out his arm to Li Jinju like a gentleman. Then Li Jinju, with a bright red face, stretched out her arm in response. And just when Tian, whose arm touched her waist, he could clearly feel an instinctive resistance from her body. Then her body involuntarily tensed for a moment before relaxing again, and she stepped onto the dance floor with Tian Hu. Chapter 943. Some things could be faked, but some things could not be faked. Tian, who could clearly feel the nervousness in Li Jinju's heart. Only a young girl who was ignorant of worldly affairs would have such an expression. In order to dispel the other party's nervousness, he revealed a smile on his face and said, "Not bad. Your dance is not bad." Tian Hu had just finished speaking, had an awkward expression on his face. It was not because of anything else, but because in the next second Li Jinju's jade-like foot had already stepped on his foot. In fact, the other party's figure was slim and not fat at all. This step was nothing to Tian, who had thick skin and thick muscles. However, after all, he had just praised the other party and was immediately slapped in the face. The awkwardness that should have appeared on his face. I'm sorry. When I heard the general's words just now, I became nervous and forgot how to dance. Li Jinju lowered her head. At this moment, her face was so red that, if one did not listen carefully, they would not be able to hear her voice clearly. As a commander, the young Tian, whose hearing was naturally good, he chuckled and said, "It doesn't matter. Relax your whole body. You can't be tense when dancing. Just follow the rhythm of the music. As long as you get into the mood, everything will be fine." Oh, Li Jinju listened and then unintentionally made a very cute action. That was, she stuck out her tongue to express her embarrassment. It was this action that attracted Tianhu, making him feel this girl's cuteness and her natural playfulness. Taking a deep breath, Tianhu suppressed some kind of impulse in his heart and continued, "Yes, take a deep breath, then exhale. After a few times, your nervousness will be reduced by a lot. Then, you will be able to enter a normal state." Li Jinju followed Tianhu's instructions. Sure enough, after a few times, she felt that the nervousness in her heart was not as strong as before. The dance steps that she had learned over the past few days could finally be used. She could even cooperate with Tianhu to make a few difficult movements. Immediately, she said with a happy face, "You're so good. Did you often dance before?" "How is that possible? Even if I didn't have the time, I didn't have the conditions. I just learned it from the 6th young master." Tianhu shook his head with a smile. "The 6th young master? Loyal and courageous? Did you learn from him?" Li Jinju asked curiously. "Yes. I was once one of the students of the 6th young master, and that was one of the best times of my life." The murderous look on Tianhu's face disappeared as he recalled the time when he was Yang Chendong's student. It was replaced by beautiful memories. Suddenly, the resolute general turned into a gentle and heroic man. This scene made Li Jinju stare blankly. She even forgot the seniority. She raised her head and stared at Tianhu's face impolitely. To her, tonight was the day to find a backer for herself. Her father's request was very simple. The other party only needed to have enough power to protect the Li family. Of course, the higher the position, the better. But for Li Jinju, if she could find a man she liked who was also capable, it would be the best of both worlds. She didn't know what love at first sight was. She only knew that it would be good if the other party didn't make her hate him. Otherwise, she really didn't dare to imagine what it would be like to spend the rest of her life with a man she didn't like, and even hated from the bottom of her heart. Fortunately, she was lucky enough to meet Tianhu. Not only was this person young, but he also had many pentagrams and bars on his shoulders. He also looked easy to get along with and wasn't the kind of person who was overbearing. This made Li Jinju's heart filled with happiness. On the battlefield, Tian, who would not even bat an eyelid, even if he was facing an army of thousands of men and horses, or an enemy that was several times his size. But now, facing Li Jinju's gaze, he realized that he was unable to withstand it. He gently turned his head to look at other places. When he found that there weren't many people paying attention to him, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then he coughed lightly. "May I know Mrs. name?" Oh, being asked, Li Jinju seemed to wake up from a dream. She hurriedly lowered her head. When she thought of the scene where she stared at Tian with all her attention, she felt a burst of blush. Tian, who wanted to ask for the girl's name, but when he asked, the other party didn't have any intention of responding. He felt a burst of powerlessness and had no choice but to ask again, "My name is Tian Hu. May I know Mrs. name?" "Ah, my name is Li Jinju. You can call me Jinju, or Zhuer." At this moment, Li Jinju just remembered that she hadn't answered his question. She felt her face burning up. She must have lost her composure for a while. "Jinju? Not bad, a good name. Then I'll call you Zhuer from now on. And you, if you want, you can call me Big Brother Tian from now on." Tian, who looked at Li Jinju's self-blaming look and found that she gave people a strong desire to protect her when she was cute. It made him want to hold her in his arms and take good care of her. The so-called bright and affectionate was referring to the current Tian, Hu, and Li Jinju. When the music ended and there was a short break, the two of them reluctantly let go of each other. Then, as a man, Tian, who generously invited the other party to sit in the corner so that the two of them could continue to talk and deepen their understanding of each other. Of course, Li Jinju wouldn't miss such an opportunity. She nodded repeatedly. Then, she thought of something and nodded reservedly. When Tian, who saw this scene, he couldn't help but chuckle. After the long song ended, the situation in the field gradually became clear. If both the man and woman felt good, they would invite each other to sit alone for a while. If they didn't feel good, they would naturally smile and politely part. Yang Qindong and Luan Xiaoyu also came to the main seat after the song. Then they saw that there were already a few young men and women sitting together in the field. Looking at the initial results, Luan Xiaoyu couldn't help but happily say, "Big brother, look at the results. A few men and women are about to freely fall in love." Yang Qindong, shook his head and chuckled. Was this considered to be the beginning of love? At most, they would have a little favorable impression of each other. Moreover, this favorable impression was forced on the woman. To put it bluntly, the choice was all up to the man. Just like this ball, it was said to celebrate the victory, connect the feelings between everyone, and also solve the personal problems of some officers and cadres. But in fact, the last one was the most important. By solving the problems of some cadres, the local upper class of the Korean people would be integrated into Yangxia through marriage. This could deepen the feelings between everyone and make everyone warm up faster. It could also improve the overall quality of the next generation. Yang Qindong didn't object to this point. After all, who wouldn't like beautiful things? Yang Qindong also didn't object to this point that the local forces would be disintegrated faster through marriage. As long as these people were loyal to him, why couldn't he develop their forces in private? It was simply unrealistic to expect that everyone was a saint and would work hard for him without getting anything in return. However, development was development. He must not go against the general direction of this big force. Otherwise, no matter who the other party was, he wouldn't mind uprooting them. When that time came, these people shouldn't blame him for being ruthless. After all, everything these people had was given to them by him. He also had the right to take everything back if he was forced to. Yang Qindong smiled and didn't say anything. Luan Xiaoyu thought that this meant that he approved of her plan. She immediately asked, "Big brother, how did my mission go?" "Good, very good." Yang Qindong was not stingy with his praise. Luan Xiaoyu smiled happily when she saw the praise. For her, this was the best reward. Outside the crowd, the parents of the aristocratic families were naturally very happy. Like Li Minho, when he saw that his daughter was sitting together with the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division and chatting happily. He was so happy that his mouth was about to split open. It was as if he could already see the bright future of the Li family. On the other hand, some of the family heads whose daughters had returned to their original positions were anxious. They hurriedly ordered that there would be 2 more songs in a while and that they must hurry up. If they couldn't find a high-grade song, they should choose a low-grade one. In short, they must gain something. Otherwise, it would be hard to say if they could still stand on top of Seoul in the future. This time, Han Chang came with his father and sister. Unfortunately, his sister belonged to those people who didn't gain anything. At this time, his father, Han Zhao, was continuing to work with his sister. It was as if he had to gain something, otherwise the Han family would be in danger. At this moment, Han Chang didn't pay attention to this at all. His eyes were fixed on Li Jinju, who was chatting happily with Tian, who in the corner. Once upon a time, everyone treated them as a match made in heaven. At that time, because the Han family had some relationship with Han Mingjin, they were at the peak of their power. Even Li Minho had to curry favor with his father. Not only did he not object to the matter between him and Li Jinju, but he also often talked about it, as if everyone was already a family. But now everything had changed. Han Mingjin was killed, and the 5-star army entered the city. The Han family was no longer a noble family. Han Chang had also been reduced from a first-class son to a nobody, so much so that he had to worry about his own life. At this time, the Li family had also changed. No one mentioned the marriage anymore. Now he had to watch the girl he liked, who he had always thought was destined to be his wife, force a smile in front of another man. Chapter 944. Han Chang, who had been misled, did not see the sincere smile on Li Jinju's face. Instead, he thought that she must have been forced, and he, as a man destined to marry Li Jinju, had to do something now. Otherwise, this shame would accompany him for the rest of his life. He lifted his foot and walked towards the corner. Step by step, he was very determined. His fists were clenched, and all the muscles in his body were taut at this moment. He wanted to teach that officer a lesson. He wanted to show his manly side. Tian, who was sitting there chatting with Li Jinju, had a smile on his face. The more he got to know her, the more he found her pure and lovely side. She seemed to be without any schemes. They talked about some embarrassing things that happened to her when she was a child. At one point, even Tian, who could not help laughing and sighing after hearing about it. Just as they were chatting happily, a sudden gust of wind came from the back of Tian, whose head, smashing towards it. If this hit, he would definitely have a slight concussion, and there might be some sequelae. Who was Tian Hu? He had killed countless enemies on the battlefield and was often used to long-range attacks. It was common for him to fight with fewer people. How could such a sneak attack escape his eyes and ears? When Han Chang approached him, he felt it. He did not move, just wanted to see what Han Chang was going to do. At the moment when he felt the long fist coming, he just tilted his head slightly and easily dodged it. Then he raised his right hand and accurately grabbed the wrist. With a fierce force, he pulled Han Chang, who was sneaking behind him, over. Under the powerful force, he directly turned Han Chang 180 degrees and threw him to the ground. Han Chang threw a punch and felt that there was nothing in front of him. Before he could make a move, a pain came from his wrist. He just felt that his whole arm seemed to be out of his control, and there was a sound of wind in his ears. He fell to the ground with a plop, and there was a huge pain in his internal organs. Breathing became a very extravagant thing. It was not until he was thrown to the ground for a while that his whole body felt less painful. At this moment, he realized that the martial arts he had learned before were so ridiculous and so unbearable. He could not even block one move from his opponent. When Han Chang was thrown to the ground, it caused a huge commotion and attracted the attention of everyone present. Everyone was busy building relationships and chatting about their feelings. In such a harmonious scene, it was impossible not to attract attention when someone was suddenly beaten up. As the father, Han Zhao was the first to let out a cry of surprise. He ran straight to his son, who had been thrown to the ground. However, someone was faster than him, for security guards appeared out of thin air and surrounded the corner of the room. Han Zhao had just run over when he was stopped by a guard. Normally, he would be extremely respectful, but now that he was worried about his son's safety, he didn't care so much. He wanted to rely on his brute force to rush up. The result was naturally that he was held down by a grappling hand. His arm was pressed down, and he let out a scream. Cold sweat poured out of his head. With this shout, Han Chang, who was lying on the ground, was completely awakened. When he saw that his father was also under the control of others, he couldn't help but roar loudly, "Let go of my father! If you have any problems, come at me. Come at me." "Shut up." A guard unceremoniously lifted his foot and landed on Han Chang's waist. With just one kick, he completely lost the ability to shout and fainted. Sixth young master. This is the Han father and son. They have some fame and influence in Seoul. Sitting next to Yang Qindong, the new governor of North Korea, Zhang Yi introduced them. "What the hell is going on? Beta Persei, go and see." Yang Qindong nodded slightly and motioned to Beta Persei. Beta Persei went quickly and came back even faster. Tian, who was naturally very cooperative, and told him what had just happened. Li Jinju was indeed frightened at first, but when she saw the displeasure on Tianhu's face, she was afraid that Han Chang would die because of this. Being kind, she stood up and made a simple introduction of the relationship between the two. She only said that the two had met a few times and that Han Chang had a good impression of her. This time he must have been angry and did not do it on purpose. Brother Beta Persei, give me some face. Han Chang didn't hurt me. It's better to let him go. Tian, who didn't want Li Jinju to be disappointed in him. He didn't put people like Han Chang in his eyes, so he pleaded for him. Li Jinju looked at him gratefully when she heard his words. Beta Persei nodded immediately. He couldn't decide whether to give face to Tianhu or not. This was something that even the young master was concerned about, but he would definitely report Tianhu's attitude to the young master. Yang Er left and returned to Yang Qindong's side. He told Yang Qindong what he had learned, especially the part where Tianhu had pleaded for leniency. Oh, he's so cold-blooded on the battlefield, but he's also affectionate and righteous in life. Not bad. Yang Qindong smiled after listening. A general killed the enemy on the battlefield. This was something that couldn't be helped. But in life, a general should also show his benevolence and righteousness. Tianhu's approach was very qualified. After some teasing, Yang Qindong decided to give face to Tianhu. If that's the case, send the Han father and son out. The unconscious Han Chang was carried out, followed by his father, Han Zhao, and his sister, who came for a blind date. But even if such a thing happened, which officer would be willing to be on good terms with the Han family? With a sorrowful expression, Han Chang knew that this time the Han family was going to decline. He no longer dared to hope for a future. He only hoped that his family would be safe and sound. He would be satisfied as long as they could keep their lives. If he wanted to be safe, an apology was naturally necessary. Han Zhao decided to wait for his son to wake up and persuade him well. Then he would visit him early the next morning to apologize. He thought that a dignified general should still have some magnanimity. But how could he know that he wouldn't have such an opportunity? He would never have it. Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong, who were in the dark, saw their son being carried out of the ball. He and his daughter were accompanying him with sad expressions. They were like dogs who saw a bone. They saw hope and opportunity. More than 2 hours later, the ball was over. The money that the two of them had used to plant spies in the homes of some of the North Korean officials had worked. The whole story of what had happened in the House of Han had reached their ears. Then a sinister plan to shift the blame was quickly put into action. Han Zhao almost didn't sleep all night. The next day, when the sun rose, he went to his son's room. For the future of the Han family, and for the safety of his family, he had to persuade his son to apologize to Tianhu. He had also investigated last night. This Tianhu was actually the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. He was one of the generals that even the Duke of Zhongdan valued very much. If he couldn't solve the problem with this person, the Han family would only be in trouble in the future. When Han Zhao pushed open the door of his son's room, an earth-shattering scream came out. Han Zhao sat on the ground with a plop, looking at his son whose nose had been cut and whose face had been disfigured. He only felt dizzy at this moment. His eyes were filled with countless golden flowers. The scream quickly attracted the other Han family members. After seeing this scene, they cried one after another. After an unknown period of time, Han Zhao's voice sounded again. Come, prepare a sedan. I'm going to file a complaint. I'm going to file a complaint. Without his son, it meant that there was no hope in life. At this moment, Han Zhao was no longer thinking about the future. He just wanted to seek justice for his son. No matter who the murderer was, he must be brought to justice. In the morning, the provincial government was very lively. The new provincial government was still choosing a site. Now, it was using the former army yamen of the North Korean kingdom, which was quite spacious. But soon the place was jammed. When Han Chang's corpse was placed at the entrance, it quickly attracted the attention of many commoners and even some officials and servants. As Han Zhao knelt on the ground and recounted the scene that happened at the ball last night, the tragic death of his son, and the experience of having his nose dug out, the surrounding commoners finally understood what had happened. Instinctively, everyone thought that Tian who was the murderer. Furthermore, one of the ways the five-star army recorded military achievements was to see how many noses were dug out. This seemed to be the case. Li residents. After returning from the ball last night, as the host, Li Minheo's face was full of joy. He didn't know how long it had been since he had such a relaxed smile. And all of this was due to his daughter, Li Jinju. If she could really become Tian Hu's concubine, who would dare to provoke the Li family for no reason in the future. In the morning, Li Jinju had just woken up and was dressing up when Li Minheo walked in. Some of the serving maids retreated. "Father, you can't be in such a hurry." Seeing Li Minheo walk in, Li Jinju lowered her head and said shyly. When she returned last night, Li Minheo asked when Tian Hu would marry her, which made Li Jinju blush. She had only met Tian Hu once, and both of them had a good chat. It was a bit too early to talk about marriage. This morning, her father came again. Li Zhenju instinctively thought that it was still the same matter, so she lowered her head and blushed. But unexpectedly, the next news shocked her. After about 2 breaths, she woke up and looked at Li Minheo and said, "Han Chang is dead? How is that possible?" "Father, don't tell me you think it was Brother Tian who did it?" "Father didn't say that." Li Minheo shook his head. Although he denied it, it could be seen from his expression that he somewhat believed it. Chapter 945. Not only Li Minheo, but many people would think the same. Otherwise, how could things be so coincidental? Just as they were having a fight, the other side was killed? Even if it wasn't Li Minheo who did it, he should have instructed others to do so. In short, it must have something to do with him. Not to mention, Li Jinju's face turned pale after hearing this. Li Minheo himself also felt a sense of sadness. In any case, he and Han Zhao were the ministers of the destroyed country. Since Han Chang could die without knowing why, then if they were disobedient, would they also have the same result at any time? In the North Korean palace, outside Yang Qindong's temporary residence, Beta Persei calmly told Yang Qindong the news he had just received. "Young master, I have sent people to investigate what division Commander Tian did after he went back last night, and whether anyone from the 1st Cavalry Division went out. Director Yu Ken of the Security Bureau has already gone to the Han family to investigate the situation. In addition, Governor Zhang Yi is waiting outside the palace. He wants to see the young master. Let Governor Zhang come over." Yang Qindong's expression didn't change, as if he had heard a very ordinary thing. This calmness made Beta Persei breathe a sigh of relief, and it also made Zhang Yi, who came in later, feel a lot less pressured. He was originally worried that the 6th young master would get angry. If this was the case, he, as the newly appointed governor, would lose a point first. "Tell me your own opinion." As soon as Zhang Yi sat down, Yang Qindong's voice came clearly. "Yes, 6th young master. In this subordinate's opinion, this matter was deliberately done by someone in order to frame our 5-star army and cause chaos in Seoul. Then, some people wanted to take advantage of the situation. In this subordinate's opinion, we can't let this wind blow. We should immediately increase our control over the entire city. Once we discover that someone dares to use this opportunity to cause trouble, we definitely can't be lenient. If there's one, we'll catch one. If there's 2, we'll catch a pair. In short, we must stabilize and suppress everything," Zhang Yi said with certainty. It was precisely because he had a ruthless side in his heart that Yang Qindong transferred him to North Korea to control this unstable region. "Not bad. Then let's do as you say. If you need to mobilize any troops, look for Beta Persei and ask him to cooperate with you." Yang Qindong was very satisfied with this answer. In chaotic times, heavy punishments were needed. In order to prevent the situation from becoming even more chaotic, he had to be more heavy-handed than usual. After receiving Yang Qindong's affirmation, Zhang Yi quickly left to make arrangements. Not long after, the director of the Security Bureau in North Korea, Yu Kan, rushed over. As soon as he saw him, he said with a serious expression, "The sixth young master is not doing very well." "Tell me." Yes, this subordinate went to see the scene. The person who did it was clean and did not leave any useful clues. After comparing the saber used to dig his nose, it was the saber commonly used by our cavalry. When Yukin said this, his head lowered a lot. "What? Do you suspect that Division Commander Tian really sent someone to do it?" Yang Qindong raised his eyebrows and asked aloud. "It's just a suspicion. We still need to investigate and collect evidence. But I don't know if this subordinate can call Division Commander Tian's subordinate to ask him." Without enough evidence, Yukin naturally did not dare to make a decision. But if he wanted to clear the suspicion, more investigation was necessary. Yang Qindong did not answer immediately. His intuition told him that this matter should have nothing to do with Tian Hu. Since Han Chang was already knocked out yesterday, wouldn't it be superfluous for him to kill someone with this person's identity? And if he did it at this time, it would inevitably make everyone suspect him. How could such a stupid decision be made by 100 victories general? But if he did not investigate, it would be inevitable that people would say that the officials were protecting each other. This would be a great hindrance in stabilizing the situation in North Korea. For the sake of the overall situation, sometimes some small grievances were inevitable. All right, go ahead and investigate. You can also investigate openly. As for Tian Hu, you don't have to ask him. I'll ask him myself. Beta Persei called Tian Hu over. An investigation into Han Chang's death began. According to Yang Qindong's idea, the Security Bureau personnel entered the 1st Cavalry Division's encampment and launched an investigation into the officers of the entire division, especially those who were not in the barracks last night. In the face of the Security Bureau's investigation, the officers and soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division were not very cooperative. Many of them even showed fierce expressions. They had killed too many enemies on the battlefield, so when they revealed their murderous aura, some members of the Security Bureau were also horrified. In the end, the 2nd Guard Brigade's Captain Dao Xiao personally appeared to calm the situation. These people represented the 6th young master, and no one dared to behave atrociously in front of them. At the same time, Tian, who was also brought to the palace. The moment he saw Yang Qindong, he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Teacher, I was wronged." "I know you were wronged. Get up quickly." Yang Qindong looked at Tian Hu and nodded. The grief and indignation on his face had already told him the answer. Usually, only people who were wronged would show such an expression. It seemed that this matter really had nothing to do with Tian Hu. Then who did it? The investigation was still ongoing, and it even caused a storm in the city. Everyone was in danger. Even with the 2nd Guard Brigade, it was said that there were all kinds of dissatisfied voices in the 1st Cavalry Division. In the palace, Yang Qindong, the Duke of Loyalty, did not do anything. However, his 6th wife, Luan Xiaoyu, was constantly running around and meeting with many influential people in North Korea. She was constantly comforting them. In a restaurant on the street, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong looked at the pedestrians on the street, who came and went in a hurry, as if they were afraid of something. The two of them could not help but show a satisfied expression. All of this was their masterpiece. They killed Han Chang, and the purpose was to frame Tian Hu. This was also something that could not be helped. They were tasked with assassinating Yang Qindong, but he was usually too well protected, and they could not find a chance at all. Thus, they came up with this plan, hoping to find a chance in the chaos. Unfortunately, even if such a big thing happened, from the news from the informants, Yang Qindong did not come out of the palace. The investigation and pacification were done by others. Facing an assassination mission that did not have a chance at all, the two of them had to change their previous plan and shift their target from Yang Qindong. Let's make a move on her. I have already checked. When she goes out, she usually only has about 30 guards, and most of them are female soldiers. As long as we gather all our strength and are fast enough, there is still a chance. Guo Xinqing said as he made a decision. His target was Luan Xiaoyu. Luan Xiaoyu was Yang Qindong's sixth wife. This was not a secret in Seoul. Making a move on her could also anger Yang Qindong and bring disaster to the southern Ming dynasty. In this way, their mission could be considered completed. We can only do so. Then I will go arrange it and gather everyone. Li Qingsong nodded in agreement. Guo Xinqing's eyes lit up. Remember, this time do not hold back. Mobilize all the spies that the southern Ming dynasty arranged here. Since we are going to make a move, we have to go all out. Even if we can't kill this woman, we have to seriously injure her. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve our goal. Understood? Li Qingsong nodded with a smile. If there were no spies from the southern Ming dynasty, they would not be able to frame the southern Ming dynasty. He was clear about this principle. Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong were bribed by the southern Ming dynasty's Zhu Huichun, but not many people knew about it. For example, the southern Ming dynasty's embroidered uniform guards were still in the dark. This was why the two of them could casually mobilize the southern Ming dynasty spies after coming to North Korea. Most of these people were arranged here before the battle at Tumu Fort to gather information. They did not expect that they would all be used now. Li Qingsong went to make preparations, leaving Guo Xinqing sitting there alone with a sinister smile on his face. Everyone in the world said that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage was very powerful and never suffered losses. This time, he wanted to make the other party suffer in silence. Whether the operation was successful or not, Yang Qindong would only hate the southern Ming dynasty. In this way, Li Huichun's goal of getting someone else to do the dirty work would be achieved. He would also become the first person to make Yang Qindong suffer a great loss. It was possible that he would become famous in the world. As the operation began, the pawns that had been lying in ambush were activated one after another. Some of them were small businessmen, some were restaurant owners and even waiters, and some were even farmers. But after receiving the order, they put away all kinds of concealment, took out the dusty sabers that had been sealed for a long time, and gathered at the designated location. At 8:00 in the morning, a luxurious carriage came out of the North Korean palace. There were 36 guards beside it, and 20 of them were female soldiers. In the entire North Korea, only Luan Xiaoyu had such treatment as bringing female soldiers out. The carriage came out of the palace, then passed through Yuhua Street, and went straight to the more prosperous Eugene Street in Seoul. That was where the rich and powerful gathered, and there were many North Korean officials living there. On the road from Yuhua Street to Eugene Street, there was a straight turn. It was a mile long and the road was narrow. Usually, there would not be any merchants or people staying here. It was also the place that Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong prepared for Luan Xiaoyu to be buried. The carriage slowly moved forward, and the 36 guards around it followed behind the carriage at a leisurely pace. Everything looked the same as usual. There was nothing out of the ordinary. However, the sudden sound of arrows piercing through the air broke the silence. The arrows pierced the carriage as if they had eyes, and soon the carriage became a hedgehog. Boom! A flashing red signal flare rose into the air, and someone among the guards issued a warning. The other guards shouted to protect Minister Luan, and the carriage was protected. Chapter 946. Guo Xinqing, who was lying on the roof of a tall building, had a fierce look in his eyes. Then he gestured to Li Qingsong on the other side to launch an attack. Before seeing whether Luan Xiaoyu was dead or alive, the operation had to continue. especially before leaving behind the bodies of the Southern Ming agents. They couldn't retreat. A sharp whistle sounded, indicating the start of the attack. Immediately, nearly 100 men dressed in black walked out from the nearby houses and corners. They moved forward quickly like ghosts, heading straight for the luxurious carriage in the middle of the road. The 30 carriage guards kept retreating until they couldn't retreat any further. Then they pulled out their weapons and got into a defensive stance. The eyes of nearly 100 assassins were red. They only had one goal, and that was the woman in the carriage. As long as they killed this woman, they would have made a great contribution. Then they could return to the Southern Ming Empire to receive their rewards. This was their only hope to start afresh and become a righteous person again. They had to grab hold of this opportunity. With 100 people fighting against 36 people, the advantage was very obvious. After just one exchange, the assassins in black had the upper hand. 2 of the assassins in black even bypassed the guards and came to the front of the carriage. They reached out and pulled the curtain. Shwa! A white light flashed, and the arm that had just reached out suddenly flew up. A figure rushed out from the carriage. Who else could it be but Tian Hu? 2 blades flashed quickly, and the assassins in black fell to the ground one after another. Not a single one of them was a match for them. At the same time, teams of cavalry appeared on both sides of the street and surrounded the area. Not good retreat. Seeing that this was clearly a trap, the assassins in black stopped attacking and turned to retreat. They wanted to use the surrounding buildings to escape. The 36 guards who had been resisting all this time suddenly had a Type 95 submachine gun in their hands. A series of gunshots rang out. One after another, the black-clothed assassins fell to the ground. The sound of gunshots indicated that they had lost the ability to escape. Let's go! Seeing that the ambush was actually a trap, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong, who were on the roof, also turned to leave. Although they had fallen into a trap this time, they had completed more than half of their mission. They had successfully shifted the blame to the Southern Ming Empire. However, at this time it was not so easy for the 2 of them to leave. Their movements had long been watched by the Wolfang Special Forces. When they were about to leave, more than a dozen shadows also followed them. Originally, there were many residences here, so it would be difficult to find the 2 of them. It was Li Qingsong's fault for blowing a whistle when he gave the order to attack. Wolf Fang happened to catch it. Then he found Guo Xinqing through Li Qingsong's hand gesture. Since they had been discovered, there was no way they could escape. Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong, who were retreating immediately, realized that someone was following them. This made them extremely shocked. They could not understand how they had been discovered when they had been so careful. However, now was not the time to pursue these matters. Escaping was the problem that needed to be considered. Li Qingsong was very unlucky. In the process of escaping, he rushed straight toward another member of the Wolf Fang Special Forces and was blocked. Seeing that the road ahead was blocked, he gritted his teeth and jumped down from the roof that was more than 30 feet high. Ouch! Feeling that his ankle was twisted, Li Qingsong immediately took a deep breath. He rolled on the ground and got up. He supported his broken leg and continued to leave. Then, when he stood up and looked up, 2 members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces appeared in front and behind him. They looked at him as if they were looking at a monkey being played. Their eyes were full of mockery. Enduring the pain from his ankle, Li Qingsong's hands reached for his waist. 2 short knives appeared in his hands. He shouted and rushed toward the 2 members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces in front of him. Ever since he joined the Imperial Secret Service, he was already extraordinary. This was where his confidence came from. Usually 6 or 7 people would not be able to get close to him. Even if he was injured now, it should not be a problem for him to fight against 4 people. Li Qingsong, who was confident, rushed forward. The 2 short knives were fierce and powerful. He slashed diagonally. Every move he made was a killing move. It was as if he would kill anyone who dared to block him. Li Qingsong was desperate enough. His face was full of murderous intent. The two short knives were also very sharp. However, he did not know that his opponents were the best members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces, Silver Hand and Steel Leg. Facing the rushing Li Qingsong and the two short knives that were shining with silver light, the two of them were not afraid. Instead, they laughed and let him get close to them. However, they did not show the slightest intention to retreat. It was not until the short knives were in front of them that they stretched out one hand and one leg. They grabbed the back of the two knives with both hands and kicked Li Qingsong's chest. With a powerful force, a figure was kicked out. Even in the midst of frantically retreating, Li Qingsong's face still had an unconcealable fear. He thought that he was already very powerful, but he did not know that there was always someone stronger. Compared to the more elite Wolf Fang Special Forces, the gap between them was still very big. Under Li Qingsong's carelessness, or it could be said that his strength was not equal, he was caught red-handed. In contrast, Guoxinqing's luck was much better. He was not surrounded when he was escaping. Instead, he escaped from danger. When he landed in a small courtyard that had already been prepared, he changed into the clothes that had already been prepared here. Then he pretended that nothing had happened and walked to the street. Reality told Guoxinqing that the 5-star army had obviously come prepared. Once they could not find him, he was afraid that they would immediately search for him. The small courtyard he was in was certainly not safe. Now, only by walking out of Seoul could he be considered to be really out of danger. Guoxinqing, who had a beard on his face and changed into silk clothes, came to the street. Unfortunately, he found that there were soldiers of the 5-star army everywhere. They had actually blocked all the streets in this area. Anyone who entered or left had to be strictly checked. Guoxinqing reached out and touched the travel pass that he had already prepared. He wanted to try to rush out, but his calm personality made him stop the impulse in his heart. He did not know if the travel pass that he had bought from the North Korean official was useful. If there was a problem, then he would be walking into a trap. He looked to his left and right, and when he saw a large mansion, he suddenly made a decision. He would hide there for a while. He didn't believe that the 5 Astral Army would be able to seal off the streets forever. As long as the situation was not as tense, it would be time for him to escape. Guoxinqing's face was as calm as possible. He left the crowd without attracting any attention and went straight to the courtyard with the word Li written on it. When he arrived at the foot of the courtyard wall, he didn't immediately jump over the wall. Instead, he first listened to see if there were any movements in the courtyard. After confirming that it was safe, he grabbed onto the 2-meter-tall courtyard wall with both hands and jumped over the wall to enter. Generally, in this kind of large courtyard, there would always be some places that no one went to. If he was lucky, he could find a place where no one would go to hide. No one would be able to find him. But it seemed that Guoxinqing's luck wasn't too good. When he jumped over the wall, he saw a young girl with a pretty good status. That girl was also looking at him at that moment. For a moment, their eyes met, and both of them had surprised expressions in their eyes. Then, the girl wanted to shout after being frightened, but before she could make a sound, she felt a pain in her neck. Then, her vision turned black and she fainted. Guoxinqing finally made his move. He also clearly saw the surrounding environment. It turned out to be a small garden. Judging from the building in front of him, it should be a courtyard that belonged to a young girl's boudoir. It was obvious that the girl from before was sitting here, thinking about something. Perhaps she was too engrossed in her thoughts, so she didn't make any movements, causing Guoxinqing to misjudge. Fortunately, the girl was knocked unconscious at the first moment and did not expose herself. Next, he only needed to avoid the initial investigation, and then he could find an opportunity to leave. Carrying the girl in his arms, he walked towards the room in the courtyard where the door was already opened. This would become Guoxinqing's temporary shelter. Overall, his luck was not bad. With this young lady around, eating and drinking was naturally not a problem. The The premise was that she fully cooperated with him. Guoxinqing was not worried about whether the girl would cooperate with him. So many years of experience told him that the more wealthy and noble a person was, the more afraid they would be of death. Under his threat, wouldn't she do whatever he wanted her to do? But how could Guoxinqing know that this girl was not just anyone but Li Jinju? Previously, she was in a daze in the small courtyard because she was at a loss about her future. Han Chang was already dead. It was said that Tian, who had also been reprimanded by the Duke of Loyalty, now he was still imprisoned. Then what was she? What if Tian, who felt that she was unlucky because of this matter and did not want her in the future? Compared to other girls, she might have the right to choose. Because of her, one person was killed and the other was imprisoned. She would inevitably be regarded as an ominous woman by others. She had no more choice. It seemed that blessings did not come in pairs and misfortunes did not come singly. If a person was unlucky, even drinking cold water could be stuck between their teeth. While he was in the courtyard, he actually encountered a criminal. Could this be his fate? After a while, Li Jinju slowly woke up. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at Guoxinqing, who was standing in front of her with a dagger in his hand. Li Jinju woke up. Guoxinqing showed a kind face as much as possible and said, "I am not a bad person. I just offended some enemies. They want to deal with me, so I temporarily hid here. Please rest assured that once the danger is over, I will leave. As long as you cooperate and don't yell, I will not hurt you. How about it?" Chapter 947. Seeing that Guoxinqing wasn't a lecher and was even so amiable, Li Jinju wasn't as nervous as before and nodded. Then the white cloth covering her mouth was removed. "All right, I'm going to let you go now. But if you dare to scream, then the white knife will enter and the red knife will come out. It's a pity that you're so beautiful and yet you're going to die. Wouldn't that be a pity?" Li Jinju nodded her head twice. Seeing how cooperative Li Jinju was, Guoxinqing smiled. "Very good. Next, I have a request. Before I leave, you can only stay in this room. If I discover any movement from you, I guarantee that within a few steps, my knife will fly out and take your life. Do you understand?" "I understand." Li Jinju nodded her head obediently. "Very good. I believe you're a smart person." Guoxinqing laughed again. Then he walked to the small table at the side and casually drank the tea placed there. At this moment, it was as if the well water didn't interfere with the river water and the well water didn't interfere with the river water. They were only waiting for the danger to pass before going their separate ways. It was as if they had never met before. On the streets outside the Li residence, the investigation was still ongoing. The main focus was on middle-aged men. As long as it was someone like this, no matter what identity they had, they would be taken away for screening. Just from this point alone, Guoxinqing was right not to rashly walk out. More than 2 hours had passed since the search began, but there was still no result. Wolf Fong, Captain Tai, who led his men to search the area and finally found the courtyard where Guoxinqing was staying. They also found the clothes that Guoxinqing was wearing. This should be one of his strongholds. The surrounding streets have been tightly sealed off. It's impossible for him to leave. How about this? Inform all the troops to search from house to house. In short, we must find him. Tai, who looked at the clothes that Guoxinqing had thrown away and said angrily, the target actually escaped from under his nose. This was a great humiliation. If he still couldn't find him, how could he face the 6th young master? Therefore, no matter what price he had to pay, he had to find him. After the streets were sealed off, the search began. The Cold Vanguard Regiment of the nearby C's 4th Division had been transferred over to guard the perimeter. The Wolf Fong Special Forces and the 1st Cavalry Division became the main force in the house-to-house search. Finally, the two tigers met and launched a joint operation. Coincidentally, Tian Hu and Tai Hu had met at the entrance of the Li family's courtyard. This place was very close to the street, and it was also a big house with many rooms. It would be very easy to hide a person here. When the two tigers appeared at the entrance of the Li residence with several subordinates, the two nodded in greeting. One was an infantryman, while the other was a cavalry. One was a regular combat unit, while the other was on a special mission. This made it very difficult for both sides to work together. But now they actually bumped into each other. It must be said that it was a kind of fate. Captain Tai, after you. Teacher Tian is too polite. This is Li Minheo's residence, right? You should go first. After a round of politeness, it was Tian who raised his arm and knocked on the door. After all, everyone knew that he and Li Minheo's daughter seemed to get along very well. After all, they would be family in the future. Things like knocking on the door, he could do it. If someone else did it, it would be equivalent to not giving Tian Hu face. Tai Hu was a very good person, so he gave up the opportunity. After a round of knocking, the door of the Li residence opened. As the master of the house, Li Minheo came out with a group of servants. Teacher Tian? Li Minheo didn't know what was going on outside, but with the idea that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble, he stayed in the house and prohibited others from entering or leaving. When he suddenly heard someone knocking on the door, he was a little unhappy. He thought that someone was targeting the Li family. But when he opened the door and saw that the leader was Tian Hu, the anger on his face suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a smile. Oh, I didn't know that Teacher Tian would come. Sorry for not coming out to meet you. Li Minheo was very polite. He spoke very fluent Chinese. It could be seen that he was an official who was heavily influenced by Sinology and Confucianism. Sir Li, I'm sorry. There are thieves nearby. We need to search from house to house. Oh, by the way, this is Captain Tai Hu. A slap does not hit a smiling face. Moreover, Li Minheo was Li Jinju's father, so he spoke very politely. Oh, so it's Captain Tai. It's an honor to meet you. Li Minheo was a smart person. After listening to Tian Hu's introduction, he knew that Tai Hu's identity was not simple. While he was smiling, he also tried to raise the other party's identity as much as possible. Sir Li is too polite. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's just that we have official business to attend to. We'll have a good chat with Sir Li next time. I don't know if we can do a check now. Tai, who also had a smile on his face. He gave enough face to Tian Hu. Otherwise, there would be no need to be polite. With the military order, they could just go in and check directly. Of course. Generals and brothers, this way please. Li Minheo smiled and stepped aside to let them pass. If it were someone else, he would be more or less unhappy. However, the leader was Tian Hu, so he didn't feel any reluctance. Under Li Minheo's lead, everyone entered the Li family's courtyard. Then, the brothers he brought with him started to search. Everyone knew that Tian Hu was related to Li Minheo. Therefore, even though they were searching, they were very careful and didn't damage a single blade of grass or tree. After about half an hour, the soldiers returned to the main courtyard. The news they brought with them was that they didn't find anything suspicious. Tian Hu nodded with satisfaction. Then he looked at Tai Hu. Since the Li family was related to him, it was better for him to not make some decisions. He didn't want others to say that he was covering for them. Tai Hu also smiled at Tian Hu. Then he asked the team members he brought with him, "Are you sure you've checked everything? There's no problem?" "Yes, there's no problem. Only Miss Li Jinju's courtyard is left unchecked," the team members reported. Then their faces showed some embarrassment. In the eyes of the soldiers, there was no difference between men and women. Since they were searching, of course, they couldn't let go of any place. However, who was Li Jinju? After everything was done, she would become Division Commander Tian Hu's concubine. How could such a woman be treated the same? Therefore, no one broke into her courtyard and no one dared to check it. This. Tai Hu looked at Tian Hu with an embarrassed expression. Division Commander Tian, what do you think about this? It's okay. I'll go with Master Li to take a look. Tian, who naturally understood that this was Iron Tiger giving him face. He immediately accepted the mission and then looked at Li Minhao, who was beside him. Li Zhenju was still a member of the Li family. It wasn't appropriate for him to meet her in private. Oh, no problem. I'll accompany Division Commander Tian to take a look at my daughter. Hee. It just so happens that she's not in a good mood recently. I'll have to trouble Division Commander Tian to comfort her. Li Minhao keenly felt that this was an opportunity. How could he let go of an opportunity to get together with his daughter and Tian, who? Thank you. Tian, who expressed his gratitude to Li Minhao. Then he looked at Tai Hu and said, Captain Tai, why don't we go together? I'll introduce Miss Li to you. Tian, who didn't want to mix public and private matters. If it turned out that the fugitive was in Li Zhenju's room and he didn't see it, then he wouldn't be able to explain himself even if he had 100 mouths. Although the possibility of this happening was less than 1 in 10,000, it was better to avoid trouble. Originally, Tai Hu didn't want to go in and take a look. There were still many places to check. However, if he rejected Tian Hu's invitation, it would seem that he wasn't open and above board. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he nodded. Okay, since that's the case, I'll go and see Miss Li. It'll be considered as a greeting. It was a great honor to have the dignified commander of the Cold Vanguard Special Forces greet someone. Without a doubt, this machine was for Tian Hu. It was also a way to express goodwill. Okay, let's go together. Li Minhao still had a smile on his face, although he didn't want Division Commander Tai to accompany him. Since everyone had the same idea, he naturally couldn't object. Thus, the three of them strode toward Li Zhenju's small courtyard. This time, they didn't bring anyone else. 1 or 2 people were enough to check. In the small courtyard, when the sound of footsteps came from outside the door, Guo Xinqing, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. Then he looked at Li Zhenju, who was still trembling with fear, and gestured at the dagger in his hand. Li Zhenju's entire body tensed up. Her face revealed a shocked expression as she nodded lightly. She believed that if she didn't do as this person said, the dagger that scared her would stab her body at any time. The footsteps outside the door were getting closer and closer. Li Minhao's voice could also be heard clearly. Division Commander Tian, Division Commander Tai, this is my daughter's boudoir. Hee, I don't know why the door is closed in the middle of the day. The weather isn't too cold right now. Seeing that the small courtyard's door was closed, Li Minhao smiled awkwardly and prepared to continue forward. Wait. Tai Hu, who was beside him, promptly stopped Li Minhao and asked, Sir Li, you said that Miss Li's door is usually open during the day? Oh, it's October now. The weather in the morning and afternoon is still very warm. Usually it's open, except for cloudy and rainy days. Li Minhao instinctively explained. After saying this, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something. His whole body couldn't help but tremble. Then his body went limp and was about to fall to the ground. Chapter 948. Fortunately, Tian Hu reacted quickly and reached out to steady him. Then he gently shook his head. Captain Tai is just suspicious. Perhaps there is no problem. Good. It's best if there is no problem. Li Minhao quickly returned to normal. After all, he had led soldiers before and had some courage. However, it was because this matter involved his daughter. Coincidentally, his daughter was the hope of the Li family. This caused him to lose his composure. At this time, Tian, who had already turned his head and looked at Tai Hu. Captain Tai, are you sure there is a problem here? I'm not sure, but we have to guard against abnormalities. How about this? We will stand on the left and right of the door and wait for Official Li to open the door. Then we will rush in. However, I don't know if Teacher Tian will have any problems with this kind of close combat. At this time, Tai Hu had no time to call his team members outside. If he left now and the person he was looking for was really in the room, he would definitely be alerted. Therefore, the next step would depend on him and Tian Hu. I have no problem with close combat. Tian Hu nodded. He was not originally a cavalryman. He only learned it later, so close combat was not a problem for him. Good. Then we will need official Li's cooperation. Don't worry, Teacher Tian and I are here, so there won't be any problems. In a while, you just need to act like normal. Tai Hu saw that Tian Hu was so confident and his heart was set. Then, his gaze fell on Li Minheo. In this short time, Li Minheo had also returned to normal. This matter involved the safety of his daughter and the future hope of the Li family. He also had to calm down. Okay, I know what to do. Don't worry. After the three of them had a preliminary understanding, they returned to the boudoir. In the room, Guoxinqing was listening attentively to something. Just a moment ago, there was no sound outside, which made him suspicious. Now the sound outside was heard again, and it was Li Minheo's voice. This is my daughter's room. She usually likes to be quiet, so the mansion actually gave her such a courtyard. Now that the door is closed, she must be afraid that she is not feeling well. Let me ask her. In his words, Li Minheo had already revealed his identity. Guoxinqing, who was in the room, did not doubt him. Instead, he looked at Li Jinju, who could not stop her nervousness, and said, "It should be your father. Tell her that she is sick and has already laid down. When she gets better, she will go and pay her respects." Yes. Li Jinju didn't dare to question him, so she nodded in response. Then she raised her head, suppressed her fear, and said aloud, "Father, your daughter is unwell and has already fallen asleep. How about this? When I'm better, I'll pay my respects to you." "Oh, where's my daughter feeling unwell? She was fine when we had breakfast this morning." The voice outside the door was getting closer and closer. Then, before Guoxinqing could teach Li Jinju what to say, the door had been pushed open from the outside, and a ray of sunlight naturally shone in. It was also at this time that the door suddenly opened, and two figures flew in from the left and right. One of them fell in front of Guoxinqing, who was holding a dagger. The sudden change caught Guoxinqing off guard. He only thought that the person who came was the owner of this place, and only brought 2 servants. He didn't think that the person who came was so skilled and moved so quickly. In a hurry, he instinctively dodged the attack and stabbed the dagger at Li Jinju's body. The dagger stabbed out and went straight to Li Jinju's waist. This scene made Li Jinju couldn't help but scream. Then she felt her body become light, and then a tall and burly body blocked in front of her, facing the dagger. Sensing a familiar aura, Li Jinju instinctively hugged the figure tightly. Then, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. A cavalry saber and a short saber clashed. At the last moment, the saber blocked the other party's attack and knocked it to the side. Needless to say, the person who saved Li Jinju was Tian Hu. At the critical moment, he took out his second dagger and saved Li Jinju's life. When he stretched out his dagger, he also took the opportunity to take a few steps back and sent Li Jinju to a safe place. Then he loosened his hand and put her down. He said to Li Minheo, who was still looking at this scene in surprise, "Look after her." After he finished speaking, Tian, who had already rushed out with his dagger. His target was Guoxinqing, who was fighting with Tai Hu. Guoxinqing, who was once an elite of the great Ming dynasty's genie guards and had few opponents, was in a crisis at this moment. The martial arts he was most proud of had become the most useless at this moment. When he faced the captain of the special forces, Tai Hu, he found that no matter how he struggled, he seemed to always be at a disadvantage. His speed, strength, and flexibility were all inferior. When Guoxinqing first fought with Tai Hu, he felt a strong pressure. He retreated step by step. In the blink of an eye, he had already retreated 4 steps. Seeing that the wall behind him was not far away, his forehead was covered with layers of sweat. Swish! Another swift blade flashed over, brushing past his arm and slicing off a layer of flesh. Blood dripped down, and pain assaulted his entire body, causing Guaxinqing's movements to involuntarily slow down. This created an opportunity for Iron Tiger. Taking advantage of the moment when Guaxinqing's retreating speed slowed down, Iron Tiger swept Guaxinqing to the ground with a long leg sweep. When his body fell to the ground, Guaxinqing instinctively wanted to jump up like a carp or a sparrowhawk. However, an extremely sharp thin knife was already placed on his neck. He had a feeling that if he dared to move again, his head would definitely be separated from his body. Guaxinqing was captured alive. Facing the joint attack of Tai Hu and Tian Hu, no one in the 5-star army could defeat them except for Yang Qindong. After Tai Hu removed Guaxinqing's chin to prevent him from biting his tongue, he carried Guaxinqing as if he was carrying a chicken. He smiled and turned around to leave. He had a feeling that this person's identity was definitely not simple. Perhaps he could get more details from him. Tian, who did not leave immediately, seeing that Li Jinju was frightened, he wanted to stay and comfort her. Don't worry, the bad guy has been caught. No one will threaten you in the future. It was just a dream just now. Okay. Li Jinju, who had calmed down, temporarily forgot her fear. She looked at Tian Hu and asked, "You didn't kill Han Chong, right?" "Of course not. Xiong Kai must have something to do with that person just now. You can rest assured that with the 6th young master here, it won't take long for the truth to come out." Tian Hu showed a rare smile. Not only him, but probably all the people in Yangxie thought of Yang Qindong as an omnipotent existence. The so-called conspiracy in front of the 6th young master could only be seen through. Guaxinqing was captured, and so was Li Qingsong. When the two were taken to the dungeon in Seoul, the captured assassins quickly identified the two as their leaders. In this regard, the two had no intention to refute. They not only admitted it frankly, but also revealed their hidden identities. They only asked for a quick death. Tai Hu, who was in charge of the interrogation, came to the palace after getting the confession. After seeing Yang Qindong, he gave a detailed report. Yang Qindong listened quietly, but after Tai Hu finished, he shook his head. "They said they were sent by Ying Zong to deal with me?" "Yes. As for their identities, we have already sent a report to the headquarters of the Security Bureau. The Ming Security Bureau branch will soon send a report to us. At that time, everything will come to light." Tai Hu revealed a naive expression as he spoke. Everything seemed reasonable, and their identities shouldn't be fake. However, Yang Qindong still felt that there was something fishy about this matter. Ever since he was almost assassinated in Ming's capital, he ordered the southern Ming merchants to adjust the price of goods. Because of this matter, all of the southern Ming merchants were very dissatisfied. Of course, they didn't dare to do anything to Yang Qindong, the god of wealth. Therefore, they quickly targeted the southern Ming imperial court. Because of this matter, the southern Ming Empire had already sent people several times to express goodwill and apologize. They expressed that the previous matter was a misunderstanding and hoped to have a good talk with the 5-star army. After all, Yang Qindong was still the great Ming Empire's loyal duke, so he couldn't be considered an outsider. However, Yang Qindong didn't have any intention of forgiving them. Under such circumstances, how could the southern Ming Empire still send people to deal with him? Even if they wanted to deal with him, they should have found an opportunity to kill him in one blow. Even if they succeeded, they would only anger him. What good would that do for the southern Ming Empire? He couldn't figure it out. Yang Qindong had a feeling that there must be a secret behind this unrewarding matter. Looking at Tai Hu, Yang Qindong said in a gentle tone, "Captain Tai, you must have worked hard. How about this? Let's leave the interrogation of Guaxinqing and lead Qingsong to Beta Persei. 6th young master, you don't trust us?" Tai Hu frowned, and there was a hint of urgency in his voice. "It's not that I don't trust you. It's just that I have some thoughts. I always thought that things wouldn't be so simple. How about this? let's continue the interrogation. You guys will be the assistants and Beta Persei will be the leader. You guys should also learn from his methods. Yang Qindong didn't want to dampen the enthusiasm of Tai Hu and the others. So he said this. I say, old Tai, you guys are very good at carrying out special missions. However, when it comes to interrogations, you guys are still too inexperienced. Ha ha! Let me teach you guys this time. Second Yang, who was standing beside them, said casually. He had learned a lot about interrogation skills from Yang Qindong. Now that he had the chance to show them, he was naturally proud. Beta Persei, who had received the order, went to the dungeon and called Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong together. Listen, you two. You didn't tell the truth before, so give us a chance now. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll be begging me to tell you. There was no torture, only persuasion. Tai Hu and the others, who were ready to learn, widened their eyes. If the other party could answer the questions just by talking nicely, wouldn't that be too ridiculous? Chapter 949. Fortunately, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong did not have the slightest intention of changing their words in the face of the grinning Beta Persei. They still insisted that they were members of the Southern Ming dynasty's brocade guard and that they had already said what they needed to say. If they did not believe it, they could check it out. Well, you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, hee. Come on, bring them to 2 separate rooms. I want to see how hard their bones are. The smile on Beta Persei's face began to fade, and his voice became much colder. The 2 men were turned on and off separately. Beta Persei still had no intention of torturing them. He just asked people to keep an eye on the 2 men at all times, and then he kept hitting the gong to give them the greatest auditory stimulation. He also instructed that the gong should not stop until the other party was ready to speak again. Every quarter of an hour, a different person would strike the bell. Such a simple arrangement fell into Tai Hu's eyes. He asked with a puzzled expression, "Is that all?" "You'll know if it works or not when you try it." Beta Persei laughed and turned to leave. It seemed that torture was not necessary, but this kind of visual stimulation was fatal. Perhaps the 2 men could bear it for a short period of time, but after a long time, they would not even be able to sleep. It would not take long for them to have a psychological breakdown. When that time came, they would not dare to lie. The case of Han Chang's murder was closed. The matter was done by the Southern Ming dynasty. Guo Xinqing, Li Qingsong, and the others' complaints were posted at the entrance of the North Korean provincial government. As the provincial governor, Zhang Yi, in order to appease Han Chang's father, Han Zhao, he specially hired him to work in the new government and gave him a certain amount of power. Politics was not about fighting and killing. The beauty of politics was in compromise. Han Zhao was arranged to work in the new government. This was a signal that the 5-star army would not exclude the local forces of North Korea. As long as they made contributions, they would receive corresponding rewards. With this move, in addition to Yeshin's hiring of more than a dozen North Korean officials, stabilizing food prices, redistributing land, allowing more people to have their own land, opening trade routes, preparing to build factories, starting to recruit workers, and a series of other policies, the situation in North Korea became stable again. At this moment, Luan Xiaoyu stood up again and added fuel to the fire. She took out more than 40 marriage applications and completed the initial marriage of the 5-star army officers, cadres, and the local forces of North Korea. With each marriage, the situation became more stable. In the palace, after Governor Zhang Yi reported his work, he listened to Yang Qindong's instructions. Governor Zhang, distributing land and opening trade routes are only one aspect of it. You have to find the most suitable path according to your own characteristics. For example, North Korea is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides. This is a major characteristic. You should think of something to do with the sea. You are also an old man from Kaegung City. You should know about the canned food factory there. You can think of a way to ask your old mayor to think of a way to borrow some elites to build a factory in North Korea. As long as you have your own factory, there will be a way to sell your products. That is the same as having the freshest bloodline. Only then will you be able to ensure that North Korea's finances will not be affected. This way, you will be able to calm the people and create enough wealth to do what you want to do. Yes, yes. Sixth young master is right. This official will immediately contact the mayor and ask him to support us no matter what. Zhang Yi nodded repeatedly. His eyes were filled with excitement. And the canned fish factory can be built. With the technology and the products are up to standard, you can consider promoting it to other places to sell. I believe that the brother provinces will support you. However, you must remember that you must not fish in a pond. You must have a plan and targeted development for the sea. You must not overdo the fishing. When the time is right, you can also consider artificially getting some fish seedlings and scattering them into the sea. Otherwise, our generation will be able to eat the capital, but the future generations will suffer. Also, you must think of a way to deal with the sewage from the factory in advance. You must ensure that the water quality of the sea is not a problem. Yang Qindong brought out some of the development experiences of the future one by one. There is no such thing as industrial pollution in the current world. But if it was not protected, it was only a matter of time before the destruction of nature occurred. Since he could make the decision, of course, he had to shake off some of the defensive measures in advance. Zhang Ye's small notebook was full of things. After learning from the experience, he left with satisfaction. Beta Persei entered the hall and reported, "Young master, Tai Hu is here." "Please." Yang Qindong took a sip of tea. It had been 6 days since Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong were arrested. There should be some results there. Tai Hu appeared for this matter. He thought that Beta Persei's idea was not much. Wasn't it just torturing people so that they could not sleep? In the past, when they were completing missions, there were times when they could not sleep for 2 days, so they did not think much of it. However, they did not expect that while they could endure it for 2 or 3 days, 5 or 6 days was not something that ordinary people could endure. On the 6th day, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong, who had lost a lot of weight from the torture, spoke separately. They weren't afraid of death, but this feeling of being neither alive nor dead was too unbearable. Rather than forcing themselves to endure, they might as well tell him everything. Even if they were to die, they could still ask for a quick release, right? Tai Hu wrote a new confession and gave it to Beta Persei. Beta Persei sent it to the dragon table in front of Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong looked at the two people's new confessions. They all pointed to Prince Nanming, Zhu Huituan. They said that the two people had been bribed by Prince Nanming. This time, they took action to frame the Southern Ming imperial court. Compared to the previous confessions, this result was much more reasonable. Tai Hu's heart was finally at ease. The matter was finally done. His mission was completed successfully. He did not let down the 6th young master's expectations. This monarch, Nanming, really has a good plan. Yang Qindong chuckled, then put away the confession. Then he looked at Tai Hu and asked, "Tell me, what do you think after receiving this confession?" This was clearly a test. It was also a chance for him to perform. After being stunned for a moment, Tai Hu's mind spun quickly. After about 5 or 6 breaths, he finally raised his head. "6th young master, this subordinate thinks that Prince Nanming is not enough to be feared. We don't need to take any revenge." "Oh, tell me about it," Yang Qindong asked with interest. After receiving encouragement, Tai Hu's face flushed red. He continued, "6th young master, Prince Nanming's current situation is not good. He is being besieged by the Southern Ming imperial court and Prince Shiping from both sides. He is already at a disadvantage. If this continues, it is only a matter of time before he is destroyed. It doesn't matter whether we intervene or not. Moreover, you said that now is the time to consolidate the fruits of victory. It is not the right time to be enemies with the great Ming Empire. Since that is the case, it is better to use this opportunity to develop our own strength. Isn't it better to sit back and watch the tigers fight? Good, good. Tai Hu, you are looking at things from the perspective of the big picture. Not bad, not bad. You already have the ability to take charge of one side. Very good, very good. Yang Qindong laughed. He was very satisfied with Tai Hu's answer. Tai Hu, who was praised, smiled. He was also in a very good mood. Next, something that made him even happier was yet to come. Tai Hu, the current scale of the Special Forces, is still a little too small. The role they can play on the battlefield is also very limited. I think it is time to expand the army. Let's make a regiment with 5 battalions and 2,000 soldiers. As for your rank, you should also be promoted. Let's make you a senior colonel. What do you think? Are you confident? Most regimental commanders were usually given the rank of colonel. Some junior regimental commanders were even given the rank of lieutenant colonel. But now that Yang Qindong allowed him to be given the rank of senior colonel, it was obvious that he was being promoted. It also meant that his status had been promoted. In the future, when he faced some of the teachers, he would be able to speak with his chest out. Yes, Tai Hu replied excitedly. Thank you, 6th young master. Please rest assured, 6th young master, the Special Forces will not let you down. Good. Remember, now that we have the scale, we also need to increase our combat power. Write a report on how much money you need. I, young master, will personally approve it. Tai Hu left excitedly. Yang Qindong, who was left behind, was not very excited. The expansion of the Special Forces, the Ghost Sniper Team, and the Eagle Brigade was originally part of his plan. In the past, his strength was limited, so he couldn't invest too much in these Special Forces. But now it was different. The entire army of the Yang faction added up to about 200,000 to 300,000 people. According to the ratio, these special military forces would need to be expanded. The main hall was silent. Yang Qindong was writing something on the table. It was about the matters after the incident between Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong. According to Yang Qindong, he was almost schemed against, so he had to give an explanation. Although it was as Tai Hu said, he didn't have the intention to send out troops. But he was not allowed to complain about it. Therefore, Yang Qindong personally wrote a letter to the Emperor of Southern Ming, Zhu Qijin. The general content was that the Imperial Secret Service, under your command, tried to assassinate me. After the matter was exposed, they were arrested. Although they said that they were sent by you, I didn't believe it. After interrogation, it was proven that they were Imperial Secret Service members who were bribed by King Nanming. This was clearly King Nanming's plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. In the end, it was proven that I had almost wronged the Emperor. Let's talk things out and let bygones be bygones. It could be said that most of the contents of the letter indicated one thing. The Duke of Loyal and Daring believed that Ingzong would not harm him. They were still good friends. However, these were just pleasantries. The most important thing was that Yang Qindong wrote that Ingzong reclaiming the southwest was part of his duty. As an outsider, he couldn't interfere. Therefore, the Southern Ming could only take revenge themselves. As for what he could do, since he couldn't send out troops, he could only provide food. However, food didn't come from the wind. It was the hard work of the people of Vietnam and Laos. However, in order to support Ingzong in reclaiming the Southern Ming and defeating King Nanming, they were willing to sell a portion of the food. As for the specific price, he could discuss it with the officials of the 2 provinces. Chapter 950. In the end, the key point of this letter was to sell grain. After Laos and Vietnam became Yang Xie's territory, the land was redistributed to the people. Because of the loans provided by Yang Xie's bank, many people had their own fields and cattle. With the help of chickens and eggs, coupled with good weather, the grain production for more than 2 years had risen steadily. Now, not only were some granaries full of grain, But the second season's harvest was also about to arrive. The governor of Laos province, Luan Shaochin, and the governor of Vietnam province, Song Jia, sent a telegram to ask if they could sell some of the excess grain in exchange for money, and at the same time stimulate the enthusiasm of the people to farm. Previously, King Nanming's forces and the Southern Ming imperial court had sent people to contact the two provinces, mainly to discuss the issue of buying grain. Unlike Yangtze, these two forces were vigorously sending out military equipment. In addition, no one knew when the war would start. Even if there were grain fields, no one was willing to plant them. Over time, the grain problem began to give them a headache. After knowing that Yangtze's provinces had grain, they wanted to buy some back in case of a rainy day. However, Yang Qindong did not agree at that time. After all, the grain from these two provinces was used to supply the grasslands. But now, North Korea had become Yangtze's territory. It was also a large agricultural country. With the geographical advantage, they could buy grain from the grasslands in the future. This reduced the pressure on Vietnam and Laos, and the matter of selling grain finally slowed down. After the letter was finished, Yang Qindong personally sealed it after checking it. Then he called Beta Persei and asked someone to send the letter to Emperor Zhong. Only then did Yang Qindong let out a long sigh. At the same time, he leaned back on the throne and narrowed his eyes. In the eyes of others, he was preparing to sell grain because he had a lot of grain. However, only he knew that he had a deeper and bigger plan, which was to strengthen the trust of the Southern Ming Empire. In order to meet this requirement, Yang Qindong was not prepared to sell grain at a high price. As long as the people and the government could make money, they would be satisfied. Looking at the Southern Ming Empire, once they realized that the amount of money used to buy grain was not high, and it was even more cost-effective than if they planted their own grain, they would naturally reduce the amount of grain they planted. Like this, if there was a day when he and the Southern Ming Empire turned the tables, he would only need to cut off the grain export chess piece to throw the Southern Ming Empire into chaos, and the opportunity would naturally present itself. Great Ming, although I admire your backbone and courage, but the weak are prey to the strong. Facts have already proven that you are heading towards decline. Since this is the case, for the sake of the Han people, I will replace you. Yang Qindong muttered in his heart as he slowly closed his eyes and breathed evenly. In the 10th month of 1454 AD, Korea became another province under Yangtze's control. This vassal state of the Great Ming Dynasty no longer needed to look up to the Great Ming Dynasty. Regarding this, there were many different voices in Bai Ming's court, and there were many curses. While Daizong and Zhu Qiyu were having a headache, Yang Qindong helped them in their hour of need. At the price of 120 taels of silver per warhorse, he loaned 50,000 warhorses to Bai Ming, which was 6 million taels of silver. Adding on the 5 million taels of silver that he had previously loaned them, the total was 11 million taels of silver. As the saying goes, money is king. After these 50,000 warhorses were sent from Shur City to Tela City, the different voices in Bai Ming's court quickly disappeared. With these warhorses, Bai Ming finally made a decision. After the new year, they would send troops to the grasslands and eliminate the threat of the Wara in the west. Although there were still 3 months because they were using too many troops, and because this was the first time Bai Ming's Daizong Zhu Qiyu had taken the initiative to go to war, the momentum was great, and the preparation time was naturally very long. According to the information sent by the intelligence department in Bai Ming's capital, this time Bai Ming would attack the Wara from 2 different directions. The First Legion was led by Yang Hong with a total of 200,000 troops, of which 50,000 cavalry and 150,000 infantry, including 10,000 firearms units and 100 cannons, heading towards the Hetao region from Datong Prefecture. The 2nd Regiment was led by the Xian Mansion's Chief Soldier Shi Wan Shan, with a total of 200,000 troops, of which 50,000 were cavalry and 150,000 infantry, including 10,000 firearms and 100 cannons, advancing from Sambar to Jingzhou in the Shaojing region. After the Tumu Castle incident, the Great Ming dynasty was divided into North and South. Bai-Ming and Southern Ming finally revealed their fangs, each looking for their own goal, and started to prove their existence and realize their so-called great ambitions. At the beginning of December 1454 AD, Lung Feng and Wu Sheng, who had lost contact for 2 years, finally sent back news. The political commissar of the 3 divisions, Qin Bo, personally returned to the grasslands searching. When the news reached the ears of Yang Qindong, who was still helping Zhang Yi stabilize the situation in North Korea, Yang Qindong, who was originally planning to return to Chichuan City to celebrate the New Year, had no choice but to change his itinerary. Following Yang Qindong was the 1st Cavalry Division, as well as the 6th wife, Luan Xiaoyu. It was worth mentioning that Luan Xiaoyu was finally eaten by Yang Qindong. In the North Korean palace, only Luan Xiaoyu accompanied him, and they met every day. Finally, one night, when Luan Xiaoyu boldly went into Yang Qindong's bed and said that she would be 18 in a month, Yang Qindong finally couldn't hold it in anymore and ate her clean. At this point, she finally became the 6th wife. Before Yang Qindong left, he promoted some officials through his performance in the past 2 months. Among them, Li Jinju's father, Li Minho, was promoted to a general of North Korea and was allowed to establish a 30,000-man North Korean provincial self-defense force. Usually, they were mainly responsible for the security of the province, and if they encountered foreign enemies, they were temporarily used to stop the enemy. Li Minho was put in an important position, and Li Jinju's face rippled with a charming smile. Coupled with the development of her husband, Tian Hu, she had a hint of a mature woman's temperament. Speaking of Tian Hu, he was the person who was most anxious to leave North Korea. Yang Qindong allowed the 1st Cavalry Division to begin to expand the army, but he could only stay in North Korea for a long time and couldn't find a suitable source of soldiers. Although he hadn't been idle in the past 2 months and had been looking for suitable soldiers in North Korea, the results were unfortunately not satisfactory. The soldiers who could pass their strict assessment were too few. In the end, only 100 people were recruited in 2 months, which was far from the goal of nearly 5,000 people. Now that he was finally going to leave and return to the grasslands, Tian was full of confidence. He couldn't wait to see the more powerful 1st Cavalry Division appear. He also couldn't wait to change his school star to a general star and step into the ranks of a real general. At the end of the year 145, Yang Qindong returned to the grassland city. It had been more than a year since he left. His return was welcomed by the city lord, Yu Mian, and the others. Most of the people in the city also walked on the streets to pay homage to their heavenly Khan. Luan Xiaoyu accompanied Yang Qindong by his side and looked at the people of the grassland kneeling on both sides of the street. She felt honored and happy, and the smile on her face never stopped. This was her man, the most powerful man in the world. Among the welcoming crowd, Yang Qindong saw Qin Bo, the political commissar of the 3rd Division Lung Army, whom he hadn't seen for 2 years. Half an hour later, in the Yang mansion of the 1st city, the two sat together and listened to the recent reports of the 3 divisions of the Cold Front Army. 6th Young Master, we know for sure that the Golden Horde has changed its name to the Great Horde after splitting into several khanates. 6th Young Master, after our army set out, we encountered heavy snow. Relying on the compass, we climbed over some snow mountains and walked across some plains. Then, we encountered the patrolling cavalry of the Great Horde. After quickly defeating them, we followed their lead and found many tall and fair-skinned people of the Gyuros tribe. We learned many things from them. The most important thing was that under the oppression of the Golden Horde for 200 years, they were extremely dissatisfied and were carrying out all kinds of resistance. Such things often happened in the Siberian grassland when the 3 divisions of the Cold Front Army entered. 6th Young Master, because our radio station was smashed on the way, it couldn't be used normally. Without asking for permission, Commander Wu Sheng, and I privately decided to support the Gyuros in the Siberian region to resist the invasion of the Great Horde, and it was quite effective. Because of our bravery in battle, strict military discipline, and fair rewards and punishments, our army has now expanded to more than 30,000 people. After the 3 divisions of the Cold Front Army, we formed the 1st Division, the 2nd Division, and the 3rd Division. Each division has about 8,000 people. Also, the Jurchen Cavalry Division has expanded from the original 3,000 to the current 8,000. The news entered Yang Qindong's ears, and he quickly digested it. The Siberian grassland that Chanbo mentioned was the future Siberian Khaganate. It effectively blocked the declining Great Horde and the rising Russian Empire in the northwest of the Great Ming Dynasty. The north of the Great Ming Dynasty was now the north of the current Liaodong, the northeast of China, including the Russian Far East. In ancient times, no one in the Central Plains dynasty had worked hard to develop such a place. At most, they would declare their sovereignty. After all, the climate here was bad, and it was quite difficult to develop with the production conditions of the time. Therefore, the people who lived here were all fishermen and hunters. The grasslands of Siberia had become a dividing line, separating these neglected areas from the war between the Great Horde and the ancient Russians. In other words, if they were willing, the vast land in the far east would belong to whoever sent troops to the north of Liaodong. That was half the size of the Great Ming Dynasty. It was impossible for Yang Qindong not to be tempted. However, at the same time, there was a realistic problem. It was too poor, and the winter was long and the summer was short. The climate was bad, and it was not easy to develop there. Chapter 9:51. Even if it's not easy, I still have to do it. Yang Qindong quickly made up his mind. Since that place had not been taken seriously and had not been occupied by anyone, or it could be said that those who had occupied it were some insignificant local tribes and small powers, if he did not go and take it, wouldn't he be letting down such a good opportunity that had fallen from the heavens? Qinbo, tell me more about the situation to the east of Siberia. With an idea in his mind, Yang Qindong wanted to know more. Unfortunately, Qinbo couldn't say much after that. Obviously, his focus wasn't on that piece of land. After all, it was vast and sparsely populated. It was mountainous and swampy, especially when the weather was cold and the time of winter was too long. It really didn't attract people's interest. However, Qinbo was very smart. He seemed to have understood Yang Qindong's intention in an instant. Sixth young master, do you want to occupy that place? Yes, I do have such an idea. Qinbo was one of his confidants, so Yang Qindong did not hide it and nodded. When Qinbo heard this, he immediately looked like he wanted to say something, but hesitated. Just say what you want to say. There are no outsiders here. Yang Qindong said encouragingly. Yes. Qinbo nodded, then stood up from the chair, stood in a standard military posture, and said, Sixth young master, this subordinate thinks that the eastern part of the Siberian prairie is of no value now, and the climate there is very bad. If we enter without sufficient preparation, it is likely to consume a lot of manpower, material, and financial resources. It may even be a huge pit that may take a long time to fill. Since that is the case, it is better to stabilize the Siberian prairie and guard it, not letting anyone invade at all. Then, with this as the starting point, we can develop eastward bit by bit in an orderly manner. After saying that, Qinbo didn't even have the courage to look at Yang Qindong. Now, the sixth young master was no longer the sixth young master, who only had a few thousand subordinates. Instead, he was a king with hundreds of thousands of soldiers and millions of people. Qinbo himself didn't know if it was appropriate to say these things, but considering that he was asked, it was his duty to say what he should say. Otherwise, he would be irresponsible. When Yang Qindong heard these words, his expression gradually changed. He suddenly realized that he had been too impatient. He had only wanted to occupy the land, but he had not thought about whether reality would allow him to do so or what kind of price he would have to pay. Perhaps the wish in his heart was too grand, so he had to race against time because he was not sure if his successor would continue on his path if his dream was not fulfilled after he was gone. Also, his life had been a little too smooth recently, which made him forget himself. That's right, the Far East was indeed not suitable to send a large army into. It was not for any other reason, but because the weather was bad and the roads were difficult to travel. Without any foundation and preparation, it would be a huge project to develop there again. It was very likely that it would end up like what Qinbo said. In the end, it would take a lot of manpower, financial and material resources, and the final result would be far less than the cost. I was too impatient, Qinbo. Thank you for your reminder. Yang Qindong, who had come back to his senses, very rationally gave up on the idea of migrating to the Far East. Qinbo originally thought that his bluntness would make the sixth young master unhappy. If that was the case, his future path would be equivalent to reaching the end. However, he did not expect that not only was Yang Qindong not angry, but he even took the initiative to apologize to him. For a moment, he was shocked. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Sixth young master, don't scare me. I'm a coward." "Haha, you're a coward? There aren't many people like you who dare to speak so bluntly in front of me. However, I like it. If you have a problem, you should raise it. If you have doubts, you should speak up. Otherwise, everyone will make mistakes. The higher the position, the more mistakes you will make. In this regard, you've done very well." Yang Qindong laughed. It was the kind of laughter that came from the bottom of his heart. Qinbo immediately laughed. Then he brought up a topic that interested Yang Qindong. "Sixth young master, although we're now spending a lot of effort in the Far East, it's still possible to develop a small area. It's also to find a way for future development. Moreover, there are a lot of things lacking in the Heber Prairie, such as food, war horses, weapons, and so on. It's a good opportunity to move some people there and help the army transport supplies. Isn't it killing two birds with one stone?" Qinbo said these words with the intention of fawning on them. After all, it wasn't good to directly reject Yang Qindong's overall plan. Now he supported sending a small number of people there, which was a sign of goodwill. At least, it proved that Yang Qindong's decision was in the right direction. "Haha, you actually know how to play tricks." Yang Qindong stretched out his hand and pointed at Qinbo, asking him to sit down again. Then he asked with a questioning face, "Since you're talking about the Heber Prairie, why is there a lack of war horses there? And weapons, as far as I know, there are a lot of iron mines underground in that area." What Yang Qindong said, as far as he knew, was naturally from the experience of the future. In fact, not only was the Far East rich in iron resources, its tungsten reserves were also among the world's top. The tungsten resources were mainly distributed in the North Caucasus, East Siberia, and the Far East. The discovered mineral deposits were basically primary comprehensive ores, accompanied by molybdenum, copper, and so on. Yang Qindong really didn't understand why there was a lack of weapons in such a place. Soon, Qinbo had an answer to these questions. "Sixth young master, you don't know, but as you said, there are still some iron mines in the area. It's not difficult to find them. The difficult part is that there are no people who can produce iron. If someone knows how to forge weapons, they will be treated like a treasure. Sometimes, two tribes and forces will fight to find this person. If they can't be used, they will be killed. Because of this, there are fewer and fewer such people. Some people don't learn to forge for their own safety." At this point, Qinbo couldn't help but sigh and said, "Sixth young master, you didn't see it, so you don't know. In some small tribes, when they fight with outsiders, what they use is simply a lump of iron. It has nothing to do with sharpness, and they completely rely on their own weight to kill the enemy. This is also why when we appeared, few people were our opponents. Facing the sharp military sabers, cavalry sabers, and battle sabers in our hands, when some of the local men saw it, it was as if they saw a rare beauty. There's such a thing, Then the Golden Horde, oh no. Now, the Golden Horde is also scarce in weapons? Yang Qindong never thought that there would be a shortage of weapons because of a lack of technology. No. Large forces would have a place where they could forge weapons. Those places were well protected, and generally, there wouldn't be any danger. They would also attract more skilled blacksmiths. As time passed, the bigger the force, the faster it would develop. On the other hand, the smaller the force, the less room it would have for development. It's like raising war horses. Big forces naturally have good horse farms, which are heavily protected. On the other hand, small forces don't have enough strength to protect themselves. The more war horses they raise, the greater the danger they bring to themselves. This is also the reason why they are getting weaker and weaker. Chen Bo's answer was very clear. Yang Qindong kept nodding while thinking maliciously in his heart. In the future, Russia's military equipment was always in the top 3 in the world. Could it be because they had suffered from poor weapons, so no matter how poor they were, they still wanted to develop their military equipment? Having said that, through Chen Bo's introduction, Yang Qindong had a better understanding of the north, the northwest, and the northeast. He even had a general idea of how to develop there. If he wanted to develop there, he had to take it step by step. As people said, rice has to be eaten mouthful by mouthful. Yang Qindong was going to start with the army first. After all, without a strong military force to play a deterrent role, future development was just a fantasy. Chen Bo, you must have heard that the army has developed very quickly in the past 2 years. There are already 4 commanders in the army and the navy. Speaking of the army, Chen Bo was naturally envious. Yes, I heard about it from Commander Hu. Well, how about it? Do you also want to be a commander and have a general rank? Yang Qindong looked at Chen Bo with a smile. I will obey the orders of the 6th young master. Chen Bo did not refuse, nor did he show too much desire. Instead, he stood up and asked himself with the appearance of a soldier. Okay, are you really going to listen to my orders? The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and Yang Qindong's expression became much more solemn. Yes, I promise to obey orders. Chen Bo continued to speak, with his body straight. I appoint Chen Bo as the governor of the Far Eastern State, in charge of the local development and military affairs there. When I'm not there, you are the sky there, and you have the right to decide everything. Yang Qindong made a very sudden decision. It was a decision he had never thought of before, but now it was announced. After the order was given, Chen Bo instinctively answered yes. But then his eyes widened. 6th young master, is this me taking off my military uniform? Of course not. Yang Qindong shook his head and continued. The Far Eastern Army will be established under your leadership in the Far Eastern State, and you'll be the commander with the rank of Major General. Hearing that he was still in the army, Chen Bo was greatly relieved. He was worried that he would walk out of the army, and as long as he did not leave, he could discuss what kind of army to bring. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.